off of his jacket, and threw the bikers over top his current duds. A shoulder roll or two to get comfy with it, then he went down through his hidey hole. The third floor was loud now. Sounds like the bigwigs finally got interested in the intruder. Too late, one of y'all was already 6 feet under, as the gangster from probably America himself would say. He kept going down, crouching atop the second floor's roofing to hear. Fighting, what? There hadn't been any police outside, so who was fighting who? Had the chillers found out who took a nosedive already? Probably not, there barely seemed to be any henchmen from anywhere other than toxin lovers here. That logic crossed off anyone from any of the other local gangs, so did that mean someone bigger? Another rival gang, pro-heroes. Midoriya contemplated deeply before he saw one person, then 2 people, finally, 3 people in his brain couldn't handle the bullshit he was seeing. Quote. God damn it. 3 idiots in spandex, one wearing almost all white in what could be called the horror to all things that hid in the night, one dressed up like some sort of demon lady, and the last one dressed up as a witch. What at first glance looked like a male stripper with 2 female strippers was probably other vigilantes who heard about the gang activities. Through him, these idiots were here because of his bad intelligence gathering skills. He went back to the 3rd floor for a minute to hold his head and wonder why a bunch of idiots were making his escape even harder. Even after contemplating all the reasons and hating every single one, he went back to the 2nd floor and dashed at the nearest goonie. He had just off a man, the last thing he wanted was to be stuck in this shit. The man had his gun drawn toward the cowering trio, not noticing the shadow approaching behind him until it grabbed him by the head and slammed him face first into the bathroom door. He followed this up with another lame, albeit slightly improved, spinning back kick straight into the wall again. His ankle, at least, was now one of the things that hurt the least on his whole body. He marveled at how all roads led him to knock out goons at this bathroom before adding his newest addition to his pile. Midoriya was a little proud it was still there at all, but for now, it was just a method to get into the rafters. He sprang up off the unconscious bodies, crawling now instead of slithering upside down. There were more gunshots beneath him, and he did have to get down eventually. He counted all 15 of them, sighed as he wondered if he could pick them all off one by one, then pick 2 to start with. After moving above one, he dropped his legs and kicked both into the man's face, sending him into a wall. He dropped down from there and crept behind another, getting extremely close before using a baby-sized drawing cut to the back of the head, followed by another spinning back kick. He didn't do it right, but he had 13 more chances on this floor alone. Over the next minute, the number of shooters miraculously and magically decreased. The one dressed as a witch cheered. See, I told you my quirk is lucky. Shut it, your quirk is the opposite of lucky. Every gun we get jams instantly. How many gods did you piss off in your last life? The demon stripper seemed pissed. Midoriya wondered how long they'd been down here. He marveled at the last 6. He liked to think he was getting really good at this spinning back kick, for someone who only got to see it moments before it decked them. These boys would be the final test. To the rafters he went, performing his age-old falling on top of the enemy trick. With all the bruises, padding, and the backpack, he didn't feel shit anymore. He rolled off and kicked, watching the body slam into another goonie. The goonie turned just in time to take a violence to the head and a spiny back kick to the gut. Midoriya slinked towards another 2, picking up a chair and throwing it at one while diving in a different direction. He heard the thunk and the spray of bullets where he had been, shooting one of the other goonies. He'd feel bad later, but right now he was just tired. Midoriya approached behind Trigger Finger with his sword drawn and kicked his knee out, forcing the grunt forward and down as a violence connected with the top of his skull, then another hit, followed by more hits. This continued until he stopped standing and started falling. The last goonie was out of ammo, it's why he had decided to use this method. He casually walked forward, picking up a spare pistol and offering it to him for boredom's sake. The man looked between him and the offered gun as he approached and practically dived for it just as Midoriya performed what he considered to be his best record spin back kick yet. He then added the gun to his collection and kept on moving. Halt villain, somebody was saying from behind him. It had all the confidence of a stray dog demanding belly rubs and was just as pitiful. Stop moving, stop it, look at me when I'm talking. Guessing by sound, it was Demon Stripper. Midoriya simply could no longer be fucked and kept on moving until something so blindingly white had managed to glow even these lighting conditions came in front of him. Cease your actions, villain, for I Doctor I'm here to stop you. Midoriya stepped around him, adopting Bakugo's hunched posture partially out of animosity and partially out of pain. His back was killing him right now, but he figured he had one more idiot in spandex to get past before he could go home, take a shower and let the fat be off somebody and the PTSD settle in. Man, he sometimes hated how right he could be. Villain, we thank you for saving us, but please do not resist. Otherwise, I will be forced to use my quirk to bring bad luck upon yourself and give you and your buddies mental scars for years. Whatever, I'm leaving. Midoriya waved goodbye as he walked out, wondering how vigilantes couldn't recognize the person who just saved their sorry asses. Right now, they were looking as bad as heroes. The doctor walked alongside him as he went. I believe you owe me a name, sir. I introduced myself, and it's only right you do the same. You're Mao, leader of the Chillers, correct? Funny, my intel had you as a more talkative. Mao was his name. He glanced at the doctor this time. The guy who owned this jacket was called Mao. You're not. Midoriya cut him off again, reaching the spot he'd gone through when he was entering this place. Mao's outside in a trash heap either dead or bleeding to death. I don't think he could have survived that fall though. Midoriya sighed but kept moving as he dropped his bag first down the hole. OHOH, you're a vigilante, why didn't you say so? I've never heard of you. Midoriya dropped what had once disgraced the world by being called a sword down the hole and interrupted again. Doctor, do you have a healing quirk? I don't mean to be rude, but I'm about to keel over and could use some healing right about now. The man, doctor, nodded and quickly gave him some apples. My quirk is an apple a day. I can infuse apples with healing properties. You can only take one every 24 hours, though. He laughed nervously as Midoriya wondered why someone with no apparent combat ability would willingly go into combat when their quirk only worked once every 24 hours. Quote. Thanks doc, we might see each other again. Midoriya gave him a pat on the back and dropped down. Above him, the other vigilantes were abuzz, but he could be bothered anymore. He picked up his shit and walked on, removing his mask and eating one of the apples. The first thing he felt was his ankle return to normal because of course it had healed the least injured thing first. After the first bite, it seemed to just be a snack, but he ate it all in the hopes of a little something more than fixed ankles. They did at least take down the people who were on the first floor, aka basically no one after he did most of the work. He headed outside and took a breath of clean, fresh air. And the sound of sirens. Shit, he watched enough hero shit to know what was going to go down, he had to. Wait. So far, wait till we cough wait for the DAAAY cough. Somebody was singing, and it was making him want to gouge his ears out. Still, he wanted to get the body armor he stashed in Bolt, even if he had to see Mao's dead. Mao's dead. What the foo did fucking anyone actually die? Mao had landed below the fire escape, which was covered with trash. Right now, he seemed to be trying to keep himself alive by maintaining his excitement. He clearly wasn't doing too well right now. He didn't even notice Midoriya 6 feet in front of him. He kept on singing and cough, wheezing and shaking. Well, he did want to be a hero. Midoriya grabbed the second of his 3 apples and shoved it into his mouth, then forced him to swallow. Instantly Mao's complexion got a little better, and his eyes seemed to come into focus. Wah, I knew, I could sing myself to life. Dragon Force is awesome. No, you're awesome. Midoriya had the vague idea that the more confident Mao got, the better off he'd be. And he was looking pretty shit right now. Midoriya took out his athletic tape and did his best to get Mao in good shape. Now just wait here, and soon the ambulance will come to pick you up. Ya got, my bike. Mao looked up at him, leaving Midoriya blinking. Your bike. Mao pointed towards his motorcycle, clearly brought over from a different country. Midoriya patted himself down, finding the keys and giving them to Mao. Ah, I knew, ya were a good dude. Get even. Mao always pays his debts. Midoriya checked his bandaging, nodded, and climbed the building. It seems his fingers and toes might have started to hurt while climbing because, after eating the apple, climbing easier for some reason. He grabbed all his shit and hurried away from the scene to get changed. Just to meet a man in brown and blue. Well, he was wearing blue. His skin was brown like a live tree. Midoriya ducked back around the corner, cursing himself for even thinking being a vigilante was going to be easy. Fight one important guy, almost shatter your 2 already broken ribs. Get healing, it's so weak it's practically useless. Try to take down an organization. Don't expect the heroes or police to do shit until you've done half the work, and then the first thing they're going to do is arrest you. Midoriya wedged himself into the shadows, breathing as quietly as he could while he waited for the hero to pass. Kamui Woods was going to run right past but stopped as he looked at Mao, still in the trash and singing like a banshee. If he stayed there, he might get spotted by Kamui Woods looking up. He trusted in the jacket, reaching through the cracked glass and trying to find the latch while Kamui Woods spoke not even 20 feet below him. Midoriya had to admit, he wasn't paying attention to the words Kamui was saying, which was why he was surprised when Mt. Lady, who'd be totally useless in this situation normally. He did a double take, then completely zoned out as he pushed his arm in as far as possible, feeling the bottom for a latch until he noticed the hinges were on the bottom. Then the latch should be. He reached up, sliding his hand along the top and opening the latches and trying to pull out the window as little as possible. He was so intent on his work he didn't notice Mt. Lady point him out, growing in size. He did notice her reflection, not bothering a glance back as he forced the window as far as it'd go and jumping through with no restraint. He definitely avoided her hand, but instead hit a metal rusted walkway and rolled into the safety bars. The bars held for half a second before snapping, dropping him onto a large machine with a thud. The round top of the machine slid him straight off, letting him land and break what was left of a conveyor belt. Quote. I need a lucky charm. He immensely regretted meeting that unlucky vigilante. He wanted to blame someone for this crock of shit, and she was the prime person right now. He slowly rolled over, mumbling to himself as he limped up. The bars that had broken he kicked, then stopped mid-tantrum. He needed to calm down and run away, plus those bars were the right size. Are you sure they said that building? Mount. Lady went back to her smaller size. This one has a nearly dead guy and some shady guy, that one has safety issues. We got the warrant for the office building, so the office building is the one we're supposed to search. When he comes out, however, you can grab him if you want. Might make up for all the destruction you keep causing. Mount Lady flinched, taking. Low blow, but come on, you see that jacket? He had a ninja sword. Total villain material. Quote. I did not. Kamui rolled his eyes as he finished his medical checkup on Mao, who still wasn't done singing. All conversation had to be done over his rendition of Through Fire and the Flames, which he sang with confidence unfounded. One of us has to do our jobs at Heroes, and oh, there he is. On the far side of the building, they could see a hooded figure peering out. Mount. Lady ran over as she transformed to be more threatening, and to ensure no funny business, pointing at him with gusto as she approached. Mao laughed, spraying spittle and blood as he gave up on Japanese. Y'all never catch him, slippery bastard. Kamui was surprised he was conscious enough to speak, but Mao just kept going, still in English. I came to this dump for a gangster. Who'd have thought I'd get to meet a samurai? He laughed as Mt. Lady finished stomping over and spoke down to the hooded form. Stay where you, and remove your hood. She slowed down, crouching and picking something up. In her hand was the mystery man's hood, propped up on a rusty metal bar and a trash bag. Quote. Kamui, I'm pretty sure we might have a problem. Midoriya ran through the sewers, laughing, and they said shadow clones were bullshit. He'd propped up a fake body when the wind died down, knowing that the wind would force the hooded jacket up and into view. If they were smart, they'd notice the jacket and investigate while he bolted in the opposite direction. Midoriya wasn't exactly familiar with where he was going, but his flashlight had another hour before it died so he wasn't too scared. He scampered along with the relatively tame-smelling sewer. With no people living here there wasn't as much waste as in the main sections of the city. When it rained and the water mixed it would, but for now it was bearable. He went for 10 minutes before he found his first exit, climbing up and listening. After a minute of not hearing police sirens, he opened it up and climbed out, breathing in deeply the clean air. Last time he hadn't gotten to enjoy it properly. The breeze gently caressing his hair, the sun on his tired and beaten body. Midoriya slipped from the city, past everyone's eyes like the wind, present yet invisible. He ghosted to the woods, one half of his training grounds. It was miles from the scene, and he should be safe for a minute. He switched costumes, admiring the mess of bruises branding his body. They hurt, but they still felt better for some reason. He stretched for a good 5 minutes, trying to work out his sores. He did feel a little better by the time he was done and meditated for 5 minutes to focus. He needed to do something with all the guns and clothes he got. He sat down, one knee up and an arm on that, leaning forward as he scoped out his surroundings. The fallen tree across the hills, the small stream underneath, the chirp of insects. While people might buy and sell the rundown property, nobody was going to do anything to this place for years, and not without some major preparation. It was the perfect place to hide something or somethings. Midoriya had decided, among many other life choices he made after he shot Mao, that he wasn't exactly vigilante material. He nearly died every head-on fight he had, could barely perform a single kick right, and was pretty much useless with his broken sword. Would he come back to it? Someday, possibly, but for now, no, not right now. He began to dig at the base of a tree, pulling out the box of memorials he and Kachan-he and Bakugo had buried when they were young. It was hard to stay angry when you were this tired. He placed the box to one side and kept digging deeper, using the shattered remains of his first sword like a spade. Under an hour later, and he had a big enough hole to bury everything he wanted. The shattered sword, well, sword was a strong word. It was closer to a club with a sharp nail in it. Either way, it was going into the hole. The guns, especially the one that he shot Mao with, which had his fingerprints, also had to be buried. The outfit didn't really have to, except for the breathing mask. It had blood and puke on it, smelled terrible, and was going in. The shirts he stole were the last thing. He wrapped everything in the shirts and placed them inside, then placed the memorial box over it, and stuck the metal sticks from his factory experience into the ground before standing up. He checked that all his outfit was packed. He then slung the backpack over his shoulder before slowly reaching for his phone. He wanted to hear something, just for a bit. A little fiddling as he leaned against a tree. Come on, pick up, just do it. Izuku, are you alright? Is something wrong? Midoriya smiled at someone being worried over him. Checking the nasty bruise on his shoulder, something was definitely wrong, but that was irrelevant right now. Yeah mom, I'm feeling great now. I just wanted to tell you I'm coming home now. He heard her sigh as he pushed off the tree, wandering towards home. His home. Alright Izuku, stay safe. I'm looking forward to spending the day with you tomorrow. He chuckled, enjoying the small back and forth. Yeah, me too, love you mom. He hung up, sporting the best smile he had since he was 4 as he walked towards the setting sun. Chapter End Notes. I'd like to say this whole section was actually the first chapter of Ronin. We see the inciting incidents that made him into a vigilante and shaped who he became. But real quick, let's address some things. Mao's alive. Mao wasn't brought back because people liked him, he was always intended to come back. In the last chapter, no one other than Midoriya mentioned that Mao was dead. I tried to tiptoe around the issue, not sure I did a good job. Mao survived partially because of his quirk, partially because of story reasons. Bakugo is no longer a good rival for Midoriya, or at least not right now. They're not in the same field and they don't see each other a lot. Shigaraki isn't a good nemesis because his and Midoriya's goals don't directly clash anymore. Both think heroes are a bunch of pompous dicks, but like with Stain have different methods. It's like a chart of violentness, with Shigaraki on one end, Ronin on the other, and Stain in the middle. They all hate heroes but express it in different ways. On to Mao. Mao serves as a much better rival and nemesis right now, as well as a measuring stick. The first time they fought, Midoriya got turned into a punching bag for 10 minutes and had to use a gun to beat him. Who knows how the next time will go. Out of the story, I don't want to give away too much, but Mao has more than one super move, and they're not all as destructive as winning a fight by bringing a building down on everyone's head. The end of Ronin before he begins. Midoriya has, for a time, hung up vigilantism after leaning so hard into it. This happens with a lot of activities where someone leans into hard and burns themselves out, but Midoriya has the bonus of being in great amounts of pain. And he stopped his vigilantism before anyone even called him a Ronin. Oof, he even got called a samurai instead. Oh well. This small arc was to show off an incomplete example of what base Midoriya was capable of. Not quite at his full strength at that moment, nowhere near his full strength in the grand scheme of things. Give everyone a taste of action and what this fanfic canon will be. In other news, I should try and upload Midoriya's move list mostly for myself sometime today. Will I succeed? I'm a guess no and try to prove myself wrong. This chapter of Midoriya's life isn't quite over, but right now feels like some good introspection. Why'd he stop being a vigilante? Because he nearly offed somebody, broke all his ribs, got arrested, and nearly murdered like 10 times by one dude alone. Where will he go from here? I think everyone in the heart of hearts knows where Midoriya's going to go. Golfing. If you follow the timeline, this took place on a Saturday. Tomorrow's Sunday, golfing day. Duh. When will you upload next, you insomniac? Will Bakugo and the rest of 1A come up in this story? Yes, but they'll act more as 1B did in season 2. Characters who are present but not used most of the time. I'm going to avoid putting that PTSD tag on for as long as I can stretch it out because I'm very bad at writing it and I don't like it. To throw some shade, there are nearly millions with PTSD Midoriya. In my opinion, if Bakugo can't give him PTSD, nothing can. That dude's fucking scary. Chapter 16. Chapter 16. Chapter Summary. Midoriya is tired, beaten, and bruised. His first attempt at gathering information has left him shaken and wounded, with his first sword broken. After narrowly avoiding capture from heroes, Midoriya has given up being a vigilante for a time, possibly forever. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. The ringleaders were in cuffs. The 6 gangs had collapsed in one day. The illegal drugs were apprehended. It should have been the easiest case the police had seen in years. But Detective Tsukuchi felt something was wrong. Everyone below the 3rd floor was rendered unconscious, with bruises indicating blunt force trauma from a weapon with the width of a pencil at the widest. The 4th floor was empty, and the minor villains had been stuck on the roof and almost grateful to see the police, especially some turtle quirked man. Plus, one of the gang heads had been outside, screaming about samurais and duels in English. That guy, Mao, couldn't be dead as part of the drug ring. His possessions were all gone except his phone and bike, and none of his gang members were there. He was barely even on the premises. Any question about what happened just riled him up. They could get him on violence after they took him to a hospital, but what worried Tsukuchi was the implications. There were a few options, all roughly equal in how bad they were for him. A rival gang came in and trashed the place so there were more powerful vigilantes in the area. They were both equally terrible because all signs showed the gangs were taken out by one man. Plus, the signs were so generic it was nearly impossible to deduce what the perpetrator's quirk was. If it was a gang, this would best case scenario be a boss. The bosses of gangs were generally the strongest, not the smartest. The problem was if the perp was in a gang, all things pointed to him being an enforcer. A gang throwing around the power to single-handedly wreck other gangs was not a good sign for the power balance, especially in the time they'd done it. Vigilantes were usually a disorganized mess in Japan and had been for years. A new player might refocus and organize them, but even on their own, the perp was someone dangerous to cross. Don't be so scared, Mount Lady chided him one side, having done nothing herself after scaring the gang members on the roof. It was only one guy who ran away when we found him. If he really was big news, he would have tried to fight. Kamui Woods shook his head at the newbie. And what? He probably knew the entire police force wouldn't be far behind, and more heroes. A real villain doesn't have to take on 20 people at once to be a threat. Mao was hauled away in an ambulance as the two heroes continued to discuss the perp. Hunched, hard to see, the entire body was covered. Even the male gender was just a guess. It was like they wanted to be seen if just to make it more confusing. Most vigilantes wear things like hero costumes at least, that outfit's more like a hitman. No one listened to the rambling detective's thoughts as he tried to figure out who could have done this and why. The only thing that was constant through all this was Mao's yelling about samurai. No, a samurai. 1. He might be brainless, but it's the straightest answer we're gonna get. Make sure we can question Mao after the surgery. I want to hear about his duel with that samurai. That samurai hobbled down the streets. His whole body was made of lead and pulled along on a single string towards home. His home, his quiet nice little home. People insulted him as he went down the street, same as usual, but right now it didn't seem to matter. Climbing up the steps seemed even harder than fighting those schmucks. Finally, he arrived on his floor and stumbled to his own door, pushing it open with no tricks this time and stepping through. The television was off, and his mom ran up with worry in her eyes as she looked him and his injuries over. His arms had bruises from Mao's punches, he looked winded, blood and snot dripped from his nose. Izuku baby, what happened? Are you alright? His arms wrapped around her and pulled her in close. Something wet and salty ran down his cheeks into her shoulder as he held her. She heard him softly whisper, I'm alright mom, everything's going to be alright now, I'll make sure of it. They stood there for a while, Inko not quite knowing when she started crying. Izuku patted her on the back, not quite wanting to let go. Eventually, though, they parted. Izuku still had the biggest smile he'd had since he was 4. I'm going to go take a shower mom, then I'll help with dinner, alright? She nodded, giving another brief hug before they moved on. He tossed his bag into his room and grabbed some clothes without checking and hit the shower. The warm water felt great on his skin, his whole body still numb. Tomorrow it'd ache and groan, but for now, he was feeling better than ever. He put on most of his clothes, scolding himself for not checking and accidentally grabbing 2 pairs of pants and no shirt. He ducked from the bathroom to his room, vowing to clean up his training clothes piles after dinner, grabbed a shirt, and went back into the living room. He set out the plates for him and his mom, smiling all the way. Izuku loved the warmth as they talked about the plans for tomorrow, insisting he was good enough to go outside. Nothing about the room changed. The furniture, the walls, they were the same they'd always been. So why did the whole apartment seem so much brighter? He'd gone to bed after a quick meditation and stretch. Midoriya wanted to wake up bright and early and sprung from the bed at his alarm. Sure enough, his body felt like garbage, but with a quick stretch and some drugs, it felt barely any better. Enthusiasm could only do so much, but he intended to use it to ignore the pain. He'd done it for years with sadness, and this feeling was way better than that. He stepped out, flashing a smile at his mom and eating breakfast as quickly as possible. They had a big day planned, and he didn't want to miss a moment. They stepped out and took the metro, walking until they hit the putt-putt course. They went in and enjoyed themselves together for the first time in years. Izuku overhit everything and Inko was winning every hole, even with her holding back. The highlight was when Midoriya hit it so hard it bounced around the course before landing right where he started, then rolled even further back. They had to stop a few times just to get over their fits of laughter. After they finished, they grabbed lunch to go and went to a park to marvel at and be scared by the seeming armies of birds, hundreds of these squawking at them. Finally, they headed home to watch crappy movies on the television. They sat side by side, making fun of the cheesy lines and overly dramatic action yet still enjoying every second. Maybe it was the movie, maybe it was the moment, but it felt nice. It felt like the old days. Izuku Midoriya looked down at his mom, giggling like a schoolgirl with a joy she hadn't had since the old days. He smiled softly and promised himself as he wrapped an arm around his mom, pulling her in close again. He wouldn't make them have to call happy days the old days, not anymore. He helped cook dinner, or at least pretended he was helping. Inko didn't seem to mind, giving him pointers and doing most of the real work. They ate together again and talked, just happy to be in each other's company. Eventually, it was time for them to go to bed. Izuku set out his clothes, checked his supplies to make sure none of his costume was still in his bag. He then did his meditation, stretching and sleeping. His dreams were strange, flitting between scenes from the past. There were ups, downs, and even more downs. Just when he thought he broke rock bottom, the previous bottom would break to show new depths. Bakugo, his teachers, classmates, everyone laughing at him, his doctor, Bakugo again, disappointed in him, his mom, All Might, feeling sorry for him. It formed a sea of people covered in shadows, all telling him one thing. There was only the sound of breathing, but he knew what they were saying. He'd heard it so many times. You can't become a hero. Everyone had their own way of saying it. He thought he moved on from this dream, but it looked like dreams didn't die that easily. Tears blurred his vision, he crumpled inward, hanging his head and backed away, backing into something. He turned around, falling onto his butt as he looked up. A figure stood before him, seemingly unearthly. He wasn't tall but stood towering over everything. He was small, but his presence overpowering. His face hidden with his back turned, but his sheer aura overwhelming. Muscles like steel cables lined his body, with scars like tattoos lining every inch of his skin. Midoriya slowly crawled forward, trying to look at the man. His stance was wide, hands on hips. The man slowly turned, but Midoriya couldn't see his face. All he could see was his eyes, staring at him and going straight through. He opened his mouth to speak. Izuku, you got to get ready to go back to school. But maybe we should take you to the doctors instead. With your injuries you can probably get excused just a little longer. He sprung up, blinking confusedly. There was no man, not anymore. No sea of onlookers, just him in his room. He groggily got out of bed, telling his mom he'd be fine. He switched into uniform, ate breakfast, and hugged before leaving. He ran to school, excited to be up and about. People pointed and sneered, but he was beyond that now. He went to class and sat down, eager to begin class. He'd plan a realistic future now. He could become something that used his head, like a teacher. Well, his students wouldn't really respect him if he was quirkless. A lawyer had the same problem. How about a doctor? It required a good head, and there weren't enough healing quirks to ever fill up the industry. He nodded, finally having a good starting of a plan. It still helped people, and if he didn't like it he could investigate being a police officer. His smile lit up his face as an explosion lit up his right side, sending him spiraling from his chair. How'd everything go upside down? Why did his arm sting again? Why was he hitting the floor? Deku, Bakugo shouted down at him, smoke rising from his hands. The fuck do you think you're doing, you quirkless shit? My mom was pissed because of your bitch ass. Midoriya moved to speak, but Bakugo stepped in and drove a foot into his stomach. You think you fucking helped me? Running and trying to be all cool and shit. Some of the other kids laughed. He tried to get his feet under him, but someone shoved him down. We've missed you, Deku. Running in, trying to cause shit. What the hell can a quirkless bitch like you do? Best thing would have been if you died in that sludge monster, Deku. God, he had the balls to show up here again. They faded away as he remembered where he was. None of them gave a shit about him. Their words became rabble as he stopped bothering to move. The teacher didn't bother to help him, just told him and everyone else to get to their seats. Why did he ever want to be here again? Throughout the class, people threw things at him, hit him, insulted him. None of it got a reaction though. It still hurt, he just didn't care. A doctor, a police officer, bullshit. No one would take a quirkless sheet like him. He stopped, remembering someone. Some big guy who swore more than Bakugo, someone who hit way harder than the entire class. Someone who threw him across the room, someone who wasn't afraid to die, who looked a gun down and let out a cheap one-liner, laughing. Someone who could sit in the trash and keep going, fighting to keep going for just a second longer. Someone braver than the professional heroes, willing to risk it all for what he wanted. Someone who smiled brighter than his pictures of All Might because of the scars adorning his body. Someone whose smile, unlike All Might's, was real. Someone who meant every word, and complimented him with or without quirk with that same straightforwardness. Midoriya found himself in the chair, in a strange daydream. Someone was in front of him. His hands were still on his hips, standing with all the confidence of All Might. His hair was tied up in a ponytail, or maybe a topknot. The man looked onward but paused, turning to look back at Midoriya. He had eyes, deep and green as the forest, staring through him, beckoning him. Class had ended, and everyone seemed to be excited to see Bakugo kick Deku's shit in. The teacher left as the green head looked out the window. He could take it, he could endure it and live a quiet life. A doctor, a garbage man, a civilian. Or he could keep going. He could chase his limits, seek the potential a certain someone had seen in him. Bakugo stepped up behind him, shoving him against the wall and breaking his train of thought. You took an extra week to make yourself feel better, Deku. Guess we can do whatever we want to the healthy boy to teach him how the world works. This world's pretty mean. Deku stared at the floor as he spoke, leaning against the wall. No shit, genius, then take my advice. Give up. Quirkless shits like you aren't tough enough for it. That's why I promised I'd change it. Midoriya put his feet under himself. Heroes, those guys who stood to one side while you nearly choked to death in slime. He imagined what Mao would say and the rest came naturally. Despite only knowing him for 10 minutes, Mao's voice seemed to spring into his head. Maybe because he never stopped talking during their fight. Izuku's eyes stared down Katsuki's. Red was pierced by green as dark and deep as a forest. He pushed Katsuki back, feeling something rise. True violence overtook him again, his in-breath sharp like a knife, the out-breath slow like a snarl. The fuck did you say? You quirkless little shit. You got the balls to insult heroes just because you'll never be one. Bakugo's hands crackled, but true violence couldn't give a shit. Better a quirkless sheet than some villain with a license like you wanna be. Some of the other classmates were about to attack him, but everything other than Bakugo was pointless. His thoughts were clear and aligned. He was going to murder this bitch. Bakugo stepped up as Midoriya spun on his lead foot, muttering. Spinning back kick. The leg struck Bakugo in the stomach, pushing him against the desk. His expression was shocked as Midoriya returned to a blank stance. His eyes hadn't moved, glaring him down like a hawk. Something was in the air, something villainous. Come on Bichugo, show me what ya heroes got. He could remember the shuffle, the laid-back smile as Mao dismembered him. He couldn't pull it all off, but he could do his best. Bakugo snarled, pouncing forward with explosions. Normally, dodging this would be sufficient, but in the tight quarters, the best he could do was mitigate it. Midoriya fought well, but his experience was in ambushes and when he was armed. The best he did was 2 hits on Bakugo while he got fucking annihilated. It was actually funny because the expressions were completely wrong. Mao's smile on Midoriya's face made him look like the winner. Bakugo was looking haunted by those eyes. They egged him on, and Midoriya looked ready to go another 10 rounds. But the teacher had to interrupt for the sake of his job. Stop it you two, you're damaging the property. Midoriya, Bakugo, go to the teacher's office now. It's fine sensei, it's fine. Midoriya laughed from the floor. This wasn't even the worst beatdown he had this week. Perspective change a man, just some quirk god dispensing his wisdom on some quirkless maggot, right Kachan? Isn't that right, Kachan? The cheery tone was the most upsetting part. That was what he stole from Mao. No matter what happened, Mao always acted like everything was going according to his plan and enjoyed every second of it. Bakugo's twisted expression was the best part. He could see how Mao got into it. Wasn't his style, but it was a fun mask to wear for a bit. He got to his feet, laughing. I'd give you a handshake to prove we're all good, but you don't want to touch me, do you, Kachan? What do you call it, a quirkless shit? He grabbed his bag, laughing. Don't worry your pretty little head, your majesty. I will never become a hero. He spit hero like an insult as he walked past the old man he was supposed to call his sensei. Senseis taught things, and all that man taught was that Midoriya was going to get what he wanted if he had to fight tooth and nail for it. His mind shifted back to the forest, to the broken sword and mask. He wasn't retiring, he was just training. After all, this world isn't going to change itself. Chapter end notes. Midoriya was retired for what, 1 2/3 of a day. Man's got hustle. I wasn't sure about writing the happy scenes. I'm not sure it came through. I'm more comfortable writing fights than writing happy peaceful moments. You thought I was joking about golf, but it was me. Dumb jokes. The Dream Man is a blatant rip-off of The Day, opening for season 1 MHA and is not All Might. I think it's pretty obvious who it turns out to be. Midoriya and Katsuki fought, and Midoriya still lost. Winning is for people good at fighting, and that's not Midoriya, not right now anyway. Quirkless discrimination still exists. It won't come up every chapter with Bakugo or the class, but it will come up again. Please if you take nothing away from my fanfic, inject some realism into your stories and follow your tags. If you say quirkless discrimination, put some in. Fiction is arguably the safest place to demonstrate and talk about discrimination since it hopefully doesn't hurt anyone. Not to be rude, but stop giving Midoriya issues like PTSD and focus on the issues he already has, they're plentiful. Other than bashing all the PTSD fanfics of which there are way too many, in my opinion, I like putting references between rivals and nemesis. Part of being ARN is encouraging growth in each other, like Dante and Virgil. They should make each other better, downright forcing it. Canon Midoriya and Bakugo do this, but Bakugo doesn't hold the rival title so well anymore. Finally, Midoriya's training and the real point behind all this. The original slime villain was the starting point for Canon Midoriya to become a hero, but that was only with All Might's help. This Midoriya doesn't have All Might. This arc, Toxin Lovers, was to replace the training for the UA entrance exam. It might also replace the entrance exam, although it will be mentioned. Lastly, some questions and answers. Haven't done this in the last 2 seconds. Mao coming back, yeah. Bakugo x Midoriya, nah. True violence is evil, it can be. Are you going to cover the training itself? Yes, otherwise I could just slip in some more advanced moves with no context of why they're difficult. People wanted me to explain the moves, so I'll be doing my best. Hero cameos, yeah 1A cameos, yeah. Time skip, yeah, but in bursts. Why are you called Bob Stevens? Cause I look generic, I'm generic, but something's a bit off and when you hear it you can't tell what. Chapter 17. Chapter 17. Chapter Summary. Midoriya has retired from being retired and returned to vigilantism, or at least to eventual vigilantism. Chapter Notes. The start of Arc 2. See the end of the chapter for more notes. No one thought to stop the cripple, Izuku Midoriya, on his way out. Why would they? He was a model student in an easy punching bag, there was no way he'd do anything wrong. Other than existing, that is. Midoriya walked for a while, going back home the faster way possible for the first time in what seemed forever. It had been a couple of years since he'd gone straight home without the fear of being attacked. In a window's reflection, he flashed a smile. His eyes no longer looked dead, but the smile still didn't reach them. The thought of those brats he called classmates made the smile bigger, and made him look less like a student than a serial killer whose prey just tripped on her own stiletto heels. He put away the fake smile, winding his way home with hands in pockets. There were things to do for the future. He needed to get good grades, plan his high school, and become a real vigilante. He gave his mom a peck on the cheek as he came home and headed straight for the room. Hero analysis for the future number 14 opened to the list of techniques he wanted to learn. The sideways cut, the flicker cut, and the upward cut. All were good, but his recent fights with Mao and Bakugo told him swords weren't always going to be around. Instead, he needed some non-sword things. From all the climbing he did, the first thing on the list was real parkour. Some real rolls and running techniques would make him a much harder target, and he wouldn't have to do stupid things like putting his coat on a pipe and running the other way. Well, he still could, but that wouldn't be the only thing he could do. Next up would be some more kicks. With or without a sword he could kick, and so it'd be very useful. Look up some kicks, what martial art they were from didn't matter much. Third, a bit of a weird one, medical care. Learning how to brace and take care of the injuries he got would be nice. Plus, he was doing this to save people. He didn't want to wait for paramedics or heroes to finish saving someone he couldn't because he didn't do his homework. For now, with no sword, that would be enough. But next up was equipment. Midoriya sealed his room by dragging the dresser slightly in front of the door, then went to his closet. He dug out a box of hero posters, rolled up for easy storage, and placed the posters on the bed. Then he drew out the real goods. A leather jacket from a custom job. It was a little big on him, the sleeves would need to be rolled up again. The back was long on him like a trench coat. However, it seemed to be designed to be worn open on Mao. The bottom didn't zip up, and it fit better than Midoriya thought. The arm bracers were cracked from impacts way stronger than they were designed to take. At least they stopped his forearms from snapping. Same for one of the shin guards, so they were a little better. These would need to be replaced, probably with some real gloves and shoes. Finally, at the bottom of the box, he pulled out the largest piece. Mao had really been his greatest supporter. The first time they met, Mao had punted his motorcycle helmet down an alleyway. The visor had been cracked by something, probably another gang member. However, the visors were meant to be replaced. Midoriya wasn't sure how Mao didn't know this, since it was also a custom job. The field of view was a lot bigger than normal, and the whole thing was kinda thin. It didn't feel heavy enough to be functional, but Midoriya reasoned that it had taken one of Mao's attacks, so it had to be pretty good. He had tried to use his sword on it, and it didn't do anything. The visor seemed to be the weak point. Still, a quick shopping check revealed that a replacement could be bought. He'd come in to do it in person, didn't want to ship it or it might be traced back to him. Last three things, a first responder kit, and a better backpack. His yellow one made it a mystery how people didn't see him coming, but he didn't want to rely on mysteries. Finally, that body armor. His ribs were a testament to the value of protecting your body, and from more than just cuts. Even his biking jacket wouldn't be enough. Midoriya was hoping for something military grade, or at least former military grade. If he could get some body armor from even 15, 20 years ago it'd be as good as the new stuff. Unless he stole some hero grade stuff. No, bad Midoriya, no crimes until we can win a straight fight. That brought him to the most important thing he needed to do, or create. The parts he needed to research, understand, and finally build. Only when he understood the principle behind it could he truly make it. Weapons. First up, would he make another sword? It was really effective, so yes, but he wasn't sure he'd make another katana. He'd do some research, but he wasn't feeling like making another one would be good right now. Something easier to start, a club, a staff, something like that. When Midoriya was looking up weapon techniques like he was as he chose what weapon to make, a comment that caught his eye said that a good way to learn the spear was to learn the quarterstaff since almost everything carried over. A quarterstaff would be really easy, and as a backup, he could make a club. But an ordinary club. Midoriya started looking up clubs by culture and stopped on his own, looking at the homepage of the Hero News he had nearly closed to switch tabs. The front page had a picture of Maruko standing triumphant in front of a temple, having stopped some gangsters from wrecking it. But for now, she was irrelevant even if she is one of the greatest heroes of our generation and extremely good at fighting in a track. Focus. The background. The temple had a statue of an Oni holding one of its clubs. It was long, with a handle wrapped in cloth and metal studs running down the shaft. That would be an excellent club for him, he could even see how he'd do it. The handle would screw into the body, decreasing durability but increasing portability. For a cheap weapon that might track people down to him if people saw it, that was golden. In its smaller form, it'd be unrecognizable in a bag or something. The quarterstaff could wait. It'd be big and even more unreasonable to make portable because of its thin width, but maybe working on an easier project would give him some ideas. He sat down and began to research the strange, studded club. The kanabo, a weapon meant to crush opponents back when samurai still fought. It was a lot taller for a human than the statue depicted, but artistic freedom allowed it to be. Still, it wasn't too hard to make. A long metal, wood covered by a metal jacket for the shaft, with studs to inflict more damage. This would be a chance to learn some real metalworking or, for the first time, skip some steps. He decided, for now, it'd be easier to make a wooden one with metal studs. Creating the studs would still be a project in metalworking. He was thinking he'd put some screws into it, then melt the ends to turn them into studs, finishing by applying glue to the rest of the screw and screwing it in. He knew what he wanted to. He did some research before he started to think of materials. Planks of wood, nails, and a dowel for the handle. The pommel would need to be heavy to get the striking power he wanted, but a lighter piece would make it easier to move and faster. A drill and wood chisel to work the wood. More lacquer, or something to harden the wood. More research said he could use fire, but that might blow up in his face. Maybe he could pair that with another method when he got good enough. Wood gardeners would be much easier, and waterproof. He'd start with that. Now he had all the materials and the pay for this week. Midoriya continued to do research, even coming up with a place he thought would be great to hide it in costume. Only a few hours later he was back at the department store, buying more supplies. renting more propane, and checking out supplies for future projects. He had added leather straps to the bag, as it came with enough to use for the second cannabis he planned to make. Finally, he set back out to his favorite abandoned building. He moved with practiced grace around the broken glass, smiling slightly at the memory of helping make some of this mess. It seemed to be another lifetime, or the end of his old one. Back to the second floor where he began to put things down. He set about with his plans, pulling out a series of papers he'd drawn the blueprint on. This would help keep it to form, unlike his last mistake. First, he picked the planks to be the cudgel part. He measured and sawed them to size, then drew with pencil the place that he'd cut off the corners by eyeballing it. A compass would have helped with the measurements. He quickly added it to the list. Instead, he decided to keep them even by folding a piece of paper and tracing the edge, using it to keep the ends even. He sawed off the corners, then drew the dots in for the screws on the two separate planks. He then measured them against each other, drilling a hole diagonally into each so that they'd line up. This way, they didn't attach head-on by pushing them together but slid together by lowering one while pushing it towards the other. This would keep it together if hit along the meeting point. He began to drill holes. First came the small holes for the studs. This seemed to take forever. Each side had 15 screws, there were 6 sides, 90 holes to drill, and having to keep every hole the same depth. Afterward, he checked to make sure the screws fit, then set the distance with a marker. Next, he wrapped the planks together and set them against a solid surface so they couldn't move. After securing them together, he took a drill bit the size of his dowel and drilled in until it was about 3 times the length of the dowel's screw-in portion. Midoriya then switched to a new drill bit as wide as the rest of the dowel and marked where he needed to stop, clearing out most of what wasn't needed so it'd be a snug fit. He fitted in quickly, assembling the whole thing unfinished. It didn't seem too bad right now. The grip was a little slick, but right now that helped him adjust grips. He'd have to keep it a little slick with the leather straps. For now, though, it was time to finish the cannabis head. He disassembled it and started with the easy part, putting the head together physically. He glued the diagonal peg on the inside into one of the holes and checked that it still fit. Then he set them apart while the peg dried, then turned to deal with the screws. He took some of the spare wood and drilled one of the screws into it, then lit his blowtorch. First, he placed the wood down on the counter, then clogged the sink and filled it with oil for the forging. Then he heated the screw head and hammered it into something resembling a stud, with the screw head smashed together so a screwdriver would no longer get it out. He then placed the wood over the sink, so that the screw head was in the oil. While it cooled, he went on to the next one. His wood pieces were numbered on the bottom in marker, and he had 4 on rotation. He began to cycle through the 4, grinding slowly through all 90 screw heads. Along the way, his wood dried. He took a break from hammering to go back over, applying a layer of glue to the 2 planks and sliding them onto each other. He then reapplied weight onto them, sandwiching them so that their bond would stick. Then it was back to forging. He took the studs out with pliers, both to protect his hands and because the screws couldn't be taken out with a screwdriver anymore. Then he placed them in warm water to finish cooling, continuing with the grind until he was finished. Midoriya gathered the last of the new studs and unclogged the drain, watching the oil disappear. It was time to put it all together. The cannabis head was now one solid piece, but he still sanded down the ends and added sawdust and glue to make the ceiling line disappear. Then came the screws. He did one quick test to make sure they still fit. He was glad he made extras, or that he just did 100 to even out the number. 7 didn't fit anymore. He then took them all back out, getting in that practice with his pliers. Then he applied glue to the ends of the screws and forced them back inside, cleaning them up as he went. He then had to apply glue to the studs and screw them back in, finishing each by wiping off any overflowing glue. This process alone took an hour altogether, easily. He could only do 2 sides at a time, then had to put the cannabis head down to let the glue dry for 30 to 40 minutes. Impatience could ruin everything, so he was going closer to 40. While the glue dried, he finally got to work on the handle in the making. He measured and chopped to length, then measured out the spare chunk of wood that would be the pommel. A pencil line to outline the cuts, more sawing until it resembled a low-poly version of the end of a baseball bat. Then came the sanding, smoothing it out, and marking where the screw would go to connect the 2. Then a long break to put in more studs. After the studs came the drilling and screwing in for the handle. One long metal screw connected both the pommel and the dowel, then was undone as glue was added to the entire ensemble, then screwed back together. He let it dry and shifted back to another fun round of screwing in studs. Back for the final pass, Midoriya had made sure all the studs were aligned the same way so any accidentally long bits hung down toward where the handle would be. Then he went back to his handle, adding sawdust to remove the seam between the pommel and the dowel and give a more rounded shape. Then he planned where the leather strap would attach, marking it with a pencil and preparing the leather with a hole punch before adding the metal bracket to keep it in place. He picked a screw that he'd flattened once it entered to keep the leather in its starting place, and went back to check up on the head. It took 4 hours for the wood hardener to set, so that couldn't be done today. Instead, he began to pack things into his bag, grabbing all his supplies before he went home. The next came, and the school had a very strange atmosphere. Midoriya didn't look shaken at all, smiling and nodding hello to anyone who looked at him. Was he confident after his last fight where he lasted a whole 30 seconds? Hell no, but he'd be damned if he couldn't look like it wasn't big to him. Bakugo came up to him, swearing again. Deku, thinking of running away again. You only got off last time because sensei interrupted me. Wanna finish it? Midoriya looked at him with a smile, small and with mouth closed. Right here, right now. Wanna find out how good you really are with me, Kachan? Bakugo actually took a step back, Midoriya inside amazed that just ripping off angrier people than him was working so well. Listen here you little quirkless shit. To your seats please, everybody. Sensei called out as he came in. Bakugo snarled, then turned to deliver another one-liner to Midoriya. Midoriya leaned forward, chin resting on the back of his hands like some cute girl modeling. What is it, Kachan? Bakugo quickly going to his seat was one of Midoriya's favorite moments. For years to come, he'd reflect on this moment as the highlight. Throughout class, Bakugo and others snuck glances at Midoriya who only had eyes on Bakugo. When Midoriya caught Bakugo looking, he gave him a little wave. Now that made him snap back. Classes ended, and Midoriya left with his back straight and his chin high. He looked so confident, hands ready to hit something. Little did they know he was ripping off Mao's walk and stance, a sort of casual, feeling confident, might beat you to death later, vibe. He went back home straight away and stayed in his room to do more research on wood furnishing and a little bit of leatherworking. After research and meditation, he hit the road to his local craft store and picked up some things to do while he waited for the furnishings to dry. Midoriya applied the wood hardener to 4 of the 6 sides since the cannabis rested on the last 2. In about 3 hours, he'd flip it and finish the application. The handle was a little more work. He led by taking the leather and checking the screw that'd go through it, then applying the glue to the bottom and screwing it into the handle's base. From there, he followed his plans and slowly wrapped the handle around the scarred dowel, scratched for a better grip on the glue. He wound the leather around and around, finishing in a second bracket that he measured and punched, drilling another hole and screwing it in as a test. Then he undid it and finished gluing the last of the leather, re-screwing it in and leaving it to cement with some pressure on it to keep it attached. While the handle was cementing, he applied the wood hardener to the entire handle. It wasn't as easy, since this part was round, but he used the same clamps he had keeping pressure on the leather to keep it off the ground and dry. He took out the new addition, Mao's old jacket, and placed it on the ground while he looked up what he wanted. It was going to take a little sewing and a lot of glue right now, but if worse came to worse he could repair it later. He got down to it as the wood pieces dried, going as slowly as possible, almost entering a meditative state as he worked, barely aware of his surroundings. His thoughts and plans for the future were cut off by a beeping from his phone, set off to go in 3 hours after he started. He flipped the Kanabo head, checking it, and put it back away. He didn't have the time to add another layer. Another 10 minutes to be safe and he checked the last of his handle, satisfied for now. Next time he'd add the protection for the leather and the last of the wood hardener. Once again, all his supplies were packed up as he went out. School had been something to endure for a while, but right now Midoriya took notes over any ideas that popped into his head for his Kanabo in addition to his schoolwork. He had spent some time after work with his mom, trying to keep the close bond he worked on and improve it. The old distance between them might have been better for vigilante work, but what was the point of fighting if he wasn't fighting to protect something? He cut to his home and back to the shop in a flash. Now he applied the leather conditioner to keep it flexible to the wrap and the last of the wood hardener to the handle, then fished out what he could now call his jacket with more confidence and began to apply the finishing touches, removing the chiller patches and continuing his work. There were very little stitching and a lot of gluing, but soon the straps and buckles were in place. They were on the tail of his jacket, about where the belt would rest. He grabbed and adjusted them many a time, making sure they'd work. Putting them away would be difficult, but drawing from them would be easy. He checked his clock and looked up some parkour moves, practicing rolling everywhere like he was a wraith from Dark Souls 7. Eventually, and a few weights in his shoulders later, the curing process ended. Midoriya picked up the two parts, flipping the handle to check the weight. It weighed only 4 pounds, but the balance of the weight was much better. Still very much in the head, but that was better for this weapon. He flipped his coat back, keeping one piece under his arm as he held the head in place and closed the clasps to keep it in place. He put the handle in next to it, pommel up. They were held together underneath the coat, attached by a clip and a length of leather to let them swing freely and not get in the way. Midoriya then dug his hands under his coat and grabbed them, opening the clasps with a tug. He screwed them together, looking over his weapon. Right now, it was about 4 feet long. The individual pieces were about 3 feet, but there was about a foot of overlap. He spun it around with one wrist, checking the weight. There was no grace in this club. It was designed to be used with violence since that was a move he had used since his first fights. There was more potential to spread out using violence as a base. He looked up how to fight with it, and was honestly a little nervous. There were modifications he'd need to make to the helmet, maybe a new set of shoes, but if he used it right, he wouldn't just beat his opponents. He'd shatter them. Chapter end notes. Yo, what a chapter, am I left? This was one whole day mixed with doing homework's worth of writing. Hope it's Gucci good. The weapon I opted to pick is called the Kanabo, but it's more famous as the big metal club Onus at Temple's Hold. I picked it for a variety of reasons, to mention. It's easy to make like the spear, but making it compact is much easier because of its girth. The second reason is it's more similar to fighting with a greatsword or nodashi. This fighting style will be a little different from his previous sword dance. Instead of being a style with a movement as a base, fighting with the Kanabo is a style with an attack as the base, violence. A Kanabo also serves a different purpose than a sword in combat that I'll try to explore. One of the first comments I wrote said I didn't think I'd give Midoriya a non-bladed weapon. Current me realizes this is a stupid idea since the character concept for this Midoriya definitely used non-bladed weapons. Plus, blade only would exclude the easiest non-lethal type of weapon, blunt. Midoriya still can't fight worth shit but is winning the psychological war now. There are points in there somewhere, I just can't find them. Lastly, a quick reminder. We won't keep doing day by day for the story. There will be time skips, it's just I wasn't sure if people would enjoy the creation of Midoriya's second weapon, the first successful and actually dangerous weapon. I put it in cause better safe than sorry, plus the chapter just sort of writes itself if I do that. One thing to note is most Kanabo are made from one piece, not Midoriya's 3 pieces. Even discounting the handle, the head is usually one solid chunk, not counting the studs or spikes. Have a good life, and remember to scare people to maintain eye contact. It's something you're supposed to do, but if you're too good at it it's bad. Chapter 18. Chapter 18. Chapter Summary. Midoriya has finished his Kanabo and begins to practice using it. Chapter Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya hefted the Kanabo with more difficulty than he cared to admit. After swinging the thing around for an hour, he had come to the reasonable conclusion that anything graceful was impossible with a Kanabo. It was long and awkward, meant to crush opponents flat, not to dance around his opponent. He'd need a new movement style, rather than the tiptoed methods of the past. His second weapon and already most of what he learned was useless. Stopping a Kanabo quickly was extremely difficult, so it was better to force it to swing through and rotate itself back into position after attacks. The only attack he could still do easily was violence, if only because the extra weight went well with the crushing blow. The Kanabo literally pulled him forward into the attack. He gave up on the roof guard stance he'd been using. There was no way around it, Midoriya was too weak to use it for long periods. The distribution of the weight and constant shifting his arms had to do as they worked the leverage tired him out much faster than the sword. Midoriya packed up, going back home to rest and relax. If he couldn't do it, he'd research how. If he couldn't research it, he'd make one up. Midoriya ran to school for as long as he could muster, walking in circles when he was out of breath to keep his heart rate up before running more. His time was getting better, especially with how little he needed to stop. The first time there were 16 stops. It had been stuck there for a while until dropping to 15. Right now, it had been 2 weeks and he just got it in 14. Midoriya glared down at everyone with a smile on his face and daggers in his eyes. These days, they said he might have some sort of fear quirk. That'd be fun, it'd make fighting much easier. Just a quick moment of shock to force an opening and attack. He sat down at his desk riddled with insults, pulling out his own pen and correcting the grammar of a few. He liked the insults, they served as fuel for him now. Each one carved into his memory as he tried to invoke everything he hated in crushing his target. Midoriya had looked up some videos of fighting with a Kanabo, and it looked ridiculous. It was all about presence and impact. Fighting with a Kanabo turned what were duels into brawls, using one hand to grab, punch, and shove the opponent to make an opening before bringing the lumber down to crack their skull. Kicks would be useful too, as the Kanabo could be used to balance oneself out. Midoriya hadn't been researching any fighting techniques while trying to get all the parkour rolls and flips. The rolls were pretty easy, but the flips were killing him. He could barely do a front flip with none of his costume on, adding anything more killed him. Now Midoriya had given up on the self-study due to aching body parts. It was time to throw in the towel and find a gym. He was looking for a parkour gym, that way he safely practiced things like vaults, the techniques used to get over or around obstacles quickly, without face planting into concrete or falling down a hill. Midoriya got up as class finished, smiled and winked at Bakugo, and hit the road to go to the places physically instead of perusing virtually. Midoriya checked the price range, size, and notability. Midoriya was fine with physically large, it'd help him avoid notice. Midoriya didn't want any that were famous and attracted attention. For the price, it went without saying Midoriya was trying to be a cheapskate. Midoriya ran back and forth, taking notes on each one and trying to avoid the big streets. While he had stood up to Bakugo and his classmates in class, the streets were a different story. No one to mediate if Bakugo attacked, and Midoriya was still trying to learn more kicks than the spinning back kick. He had at least started to get it to chest level instead of stomach level, so his flexibility was increasing. Midoriya stopped to admire a gang sign spray painted on a wall. It wouldn't last long, and it took someone pretty ballsy to do it this close to the police station. Still, they weren't gangsters for nothing. The Undying, into his notes the name would go. Maybe he'd research it, maybe he'd post it on the vigilante board. Who knows how the heroes didn't find it, maybe because the website was labeled as something so stupid no one would think to check. Still, he was certain that the XX website was the one the vigilantes used. Some of the details, like Dr. Doctor and Dr. Doctor, were too close for a coincidence. Still, in front of him was definitely the worst one. From an anime standpoint, inside would be some hidden master capable of great secrets. Here in the real world, it was just what it looked like, a barely held together gym. Midoriya didn't go inside, he hadn't with the others, and he wasn't going to start with a rat's nest. He marked it down in his notes and moved on, stopping as he heard shouting. He knew something bad would happen. He'd gone a full 2 weeks without getting his ass handed to him. Just give us the money, bitch. So many people say that now. Is it a requirement to become a bad guy? 2 guys and 1 gendered person. The stuffy coat made it hard to tell who it was, and it was only Spring. Probably a side effect of their quirk. He adopted his original disguise, leaving his bag and taking out 2 3-feet-long fancy sticks, wrapping an undershirt around his head as he approached. You already have my money. The voice was muffled and the person was short as hell, looking at 3 feet tall tops. High pitched in, jolly. That was weird. This seemed fake until the smaller person tried to bolt, getting kicked back in place by one of the people. Just give us the wallet, short stack, and you'll be fine. The smaller man tossed a knife that was beginning to glow red. We need to make sure you're not skimping us, you see. Oh, alrighty. The smaller thing went into a pocket, pulling out a can of something and getting it promptly crushed. Try pulling any more tricks and you'll be the next one I crush. The wallet now. The man had stomped the can into the wall, nearly crushing the small figure's hand as well. One of their hands, paws, was still in their pocket. They seemed to be a sentient animal, meaning their chances of having an attacking quirk were low. Now is when Midoriya stepped in, literally. To their view, a strange figure walked in with a weird baseball bat in his right hand, stretched out and pointing straight away from his body to the right side. The figure was shirtless and boasting more scars than a cutting board. White cloth wrapped around his head, his entire head covered like a mummy. Aye, you better beat. The figure sprang forward, headbutting the closer and smaller one. When he stumbled back, the figure brought his bat up. The voice was muffled and quiet, mixed with heavy breathes out like snarls. Violent style, second form. Beat down. He followed the first part of beat down, the headbutt, by bringing the pommel down onto the man's head with only his right arm. The man's whole body was forced downward and his swipe with the knife only cut the stranger's pants. The final part of beat down arrived, with Midoriya taking a slight step back, then grabbing the Kanabo with both hands and hammering him over the back. The man's legs collapsed under him and he hit the ground. The stranger didn't even look at the person he was saving. Call the police and book it. Now. The second man raised his leg as the stranger stepped between him and the victim, holding the bat with arms slightly tensed. The kick lashed out, but instead of blocking it, the stranger opted to let it go over his Kanabo and then shoved the kick upward and over his shoulder. The man was now off balance, but the Kanabo was too close to be used for a real attack. The stranger then dropped it, since it was useless, and used his own kick, the spinning back kick. At such a close range, it lost power but was near unavoidable. This entire exchange was under 2 seconds. It was hard for Midoriya to know what had happened if he hadn't planned this from the moment he saw the man kick, clearly relying on a quirk to generate power rather than a real technique. The man stumbled backward, preparing to probably try and book it before the stranger stepped up, back into his initial posture of one arm holding the bat, straight out to his right side. It didn't seem to have any defense, and the man thought this was his chance. The stranger must have thought he hit his head and lowered his guard. The man took a moment before springing forward to try and tackle him. His shoulder went straight into the stranger's left hand, which held him back. The stranger had studied dozens of postures before deciding on this one. Legs still slightly bent, but a slight lean forward at all times, ready to lock his legs as he leaned forward to give as much resistance to being pushed back. The immovable stance. The man might have weighed more, but with his body lowered he could generate enough force to get up. His grip slid from the shoulder to the back of the neck. Thought I told you. The stranger's head whipped back, then he pulled the man forward with a sharp tug as he brought their heads together. The part of the skull that was being hit played a huge part in how effective this attack was. The stranger aimed for the nose, to break it and make his opponent flinch. Normally accuracy would be a problem, but the neck hold made it hard for the man to move. The man screamed, but was cut off by a pommel dropping on his head. He collapsed on the spot, too tired to keep going. The stranger went back to his normal posture. Call the police and book it. I said that, didn't I? The person he was talking to, the victim, was still standing there like an idiot. Who just watched a violent psychopath beat people down in front of them without getting the cops? The figure wasn't a hero, at least not any Japanese or American one Midoriya recognized. The small figure was muttering to himself, almost at Midoriya's own pace. Quote. Using a hand grip to force the opponent's face to be stuck while striking down at their nose, and pulling them in so their own weight is turned against them while using the top of one's head to assure minimal damage. It's over. I thought he'd go for another few hits. Midoriya checked the two's pulse, shaking his head. You seem to be fine, so goodbye. Try to react better next time, you might not be getting saved. He took a few steps before stopping, giving a slight turn of the head to the smaller figure. Oh, and instead of taking out the can you should have thrown it into the trash and ran. They would have had to search the trash and probably wouldn't notice that what you threw wasn't a wallet, letting you go. With those insightful words, Midoriya shipped off, grabbing his things and booking it through alleyways until he thought he was far enough away and taking his coat off his backpack, putting his undershirt on properly and putting the jacket on over top. The kanabo was split and went back into the backpack, and he went to the last two gyms. The victim was still muttering to himself when he remembered what he was going to do before the stranger showed up, and clicked a button. In 20 seconds, Midnight came rushing as fast as she could in those heels. If he told her to ditch the hell so she could run faster once, he'd told her a million times. Still, it was impressive how fast she could go in those things. Maybe he'd look taller if he wore some. Principal, Nezu, what's wrong? She leaned against the wall, running in heels clearly taking its toll. Talking to the police, Speaking of the police, they showed up after midnight with guns drawn. Compared to the barbaric elegance of the stranger, who just rushed in with no questions and crushed the opponents, it felt rather ridiculous. Nezu laughed, gesturing for everyone to calm down. It's fine, it's fine. Power Loader made a knife-proof jacket for me, though I must say it strikes my fur the wrong way. Don't you think this makes me look fat? Everyone calmed down at his joking until someone asked who knocked out the muggers. They had, quite possibly, picked the worst target in the world. Nezu was going to take care of them himself when he realized it'd be great practice for Midnight, but a third party showed up before Midnight could, not that Nezu would say him. I clearly did, obviously. I knew though Midnight was with you wonderful officers, and I needed some handcuffs to arrest them. Could you do the honor, sirs? He bounced up, ditching the coat. It really did look ridiculous, but Midnight grabbed it and checked it for stabbing, only feeling safe when it was clean. You need to be more careful. The principal of UA is a valuable target, so stop wandering off. I'm supposed to be babysitting me, I think, not Nimari. He laughed as he bounced off to the car. Say, didn't we get some reports of increased vigilante activity? Midnight tried to judge his mood before slowly nodding. Yes, the police are calling it a super vigilante, cause they're creating such an uprising in the vigilante community. However, Aizawa hasn't heard any reports of them and we don't think they've done anything since the Toxin Lover takedown. She'd done her research. He'd been a little worried about her not paying attention. She still wasn't, otherwise, she'd know the supposed vigilante was behind more than just the Toxin Lover takedown. Its proper name was the Little Musudafu decapitation. They called it that since all the gang heads were cut and arrested or cut off. The little part came from the gangs in question being smaller gangs. As a little punishment, and to pursue his theory, the small mammal gave her a big smile. That's great that you know all that. You must be great at finding information. She fell for it hook, line and sinker, despite having been stuck with him for years. Of course I am, you just never noticed how great I am at. You could see her expression as she realized what was happening in real time. The happiness and pride evaporated into worry. She put on a slight smile as she tried to backtrack. I'm actually not that good, you see, sir. I think you should investigate our mysterious super vigilante. You seem to be so excited. I'll give you a week to get with Aizawa and get your ducks in a row. He laughed, jumping up to pat the dead-looking woman on the back as he took the little free time she had. It would count for her harrowing hours, so she'd get paid, but she'd have little time for anything else. Still, isn't it funny, the name super vigilante? How, sir? Nimari, for she was too sad and unprofessional to be called Midnight right now, replied automatically, hoping that going along with his idea would make her assignment shorter. Super vigilante was taken and used before either superhero or supervillain. How funny. Nezu laughed again as he jumped into the car seat and buckled himself down. What are you waiting for, Nimari? Come, you've got research to do. Nimari groaned as she got in and shut the door after herself, the car leaving for the UA High School in the distance. Midoriya finished charting out the gyms and went home to look at reviews. You could tell a lot about anything from the middle-tier reviews. Bottom-tier and top-tier reviews were often skewed by outside sources that couldn't be traced. The middle, however, was nice and true most of the time. Midoriya tried to avoid using chairs as much as possible now, squatting instead. It stretched his calves, made his ankles more flexible, and was a posture he saw a lot when people used kanabos. Plus, it strengthened his legs. It did make note-taking like this pretty difficult though. He rested his notes against one leg as he wrote, muttering about distance and working out the cost per month. He only planned for 1 month right now, but he wasn't sure he'd get it right now. That fight proved that he needed more kicks than just the spinning back kick. A real spinning back kick required a lot of room to work, and so did the kanabo. He needed to pair it up with something that could be used in close quarters and deal damage. Even just learning a punch for his left hand would be sufficient. More notes, more research. He was practically a college student trying to write a thesis with how much research he did. The jab and hook would be great from boxing as not very difficult attacks, and he could turn them into shoves or pulls. Next were the kicks. A little research said the two easiest kicks were a shoving front kick and a side kick. The side kick was easier, but the shoving front kick was closer to the spinning back kick. The side kick was more to what he wanted though, so that's what he'd learn. Between the punches, the jab was easier, so the two techniques he'd try to learn would be the jab and the side kick. The forest was a great place to practice a punch and kick. He marked a tree and just tried to hit it high enough. He'd put tape on a branch and try to hit it and miss for a few hours with the occasional accidental hit. Punching wasn't much better, as he took tons of notes over punching and it didn't seem any different. Midoriya foresaw some hand wraps in his future as he practiced punching a tree. He'd been doing it for a couple of days, but it occurred to him that he couldn't really practice dragging or shoving the tree, just punching. He'd need a training dummy that he could move off balance. As he racked his brain, his thoughts turned to his old chair that he stopped using. It had wheels to roll around, and if he rigged something on top of it he could practice shoving it around. Adding weight to make it harder to move, it wouldn't be great but it could work. He stopped after another representative of 10 kicks, squatting down and pulling out his notes to write the idea down. He then explored a few tangents before settling on a box atop the chair, attached with tape or something so it didn't fall off when struck. Another look over and he nodded, then put the notes away and went back to his reps. The next day he had slowly disassembled and resembled his chair inside his favorite ex-office since the wheels wouldn't roll well on the grassy hill. He then put a cardboard box atop it, tapped it in place, and got to kicking and shoving. It was more of a workout since the wheels meant it was constantly moving and forcing him to chase it. The lack of weight was also an issue, but other than putting all his stuff inside the box which barely did anything, that was a problem he couldn't currently solve. Still, pushing and pulling the chair off center to tip it was good practice. The 5 wheels on the bottom gave it a stable base and made it hard to turn with only muscle since it practically never had any momentum on its own. He couldn't practice his kicks as much right now, but for those, he just put his backpack down and basically tried to play soccer with it. A good kick would send it spiraling across the room. He spent hours drilling over and over until they seemed to be ingrained in his mind, almost second nature. The punch became more of a quick annoying flicker, striking whenever with little force or giving a slight tug to set up his kick. His kick could hit twice in a row, even reaching 3 successful kicks before the bag went flying off a few times. Midoriya stopped when he was satisfied that his hand and foot hurt from all the kicking but didn't feel strained. He'd need to get some wraps for both of those next Monday. He disassembled the dummy, then continued disassembling the chair and put the parts inside the box. Then he put the box inside one of the shelves and bailed. Midoriya finished another set, checking the time. It was 7 o'clock, he could get cranked out most, if not all, of his weekend's homework before bed. He rose from the floor, grabbing his clothes and hitting the shower. Warm water cleaned him off, then cold water refocused him. Online schooling would give me more time, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to at least see other people without Bakugo ruining everything. Maybe then they won't be such colossal dicks. One semester, or maybe just some of his classes would be in person. If he could take physical education, he might do that. Midoriya dried off and changed, going back to his room and settling down as he began to work. He wasn't buff, he wasn't even that muscular, but he was fit now. A month of training had left him with a little better balance than he had before. He still hadn't gotten around to the whole gym thing, but he'd get around to it. Eventually. But for now, he glanced over at his school bag. There were 2 very solid corners, like something underneath was propped against them and pushing the corners out, about 3 feet long. He had some heavier boots held together by glue, tape, and prayers. And just today he'd gotten to get the visors he'd need to fix up the bike helmet. He'd been training for 1 month for the first real test run of the Kanabo. He practiced the fine art of adjusting his grip, how to angle his blows not to just damage his opponent but knock them around like flies. One-handed grappling, striking, and shoving. Yes, he did it on more than just a chair. Eventually. Midoriya spared a glance at the things he didn't fix, the cracked arm and shin covers. The crappy body armor he swiped that didn't fit right. It was better than nothing, at least. Tomorrow was Saturday, and he had done his research. This wasn't going to be a big job again, just picking off the remains of the chillers. Midoriya adjusted the jacket, making sure there were no tears. As the final checkoff was complete, Midoriya went over to his weekend homework. A series of warehouses and where their power boxes were. If he found those and turned off the lights, he'd be in for a great time. Chapter and notes. Yigati eat. First major time skips, just to hurry the story along. I didn't want Midoriya to gain too many powers in a time skip, so I'm gonna try to focus on only developing 1 or 2 at a time during time skips. Equipment-wise, some things I didn't mention. Midoriya has 3 ill-fitting bulletproof vests, right now he only wears 1 at a time. Midoriya did buy the first aid kit but has not taken the first aid classes yet. Midoriya's current shoes are a lot more like his classic canon version. When fighting with weapons, there are usually 2 kinds. Light ones that allow for a lot of movement without getting in the way, or the old kind, his painted black sneakers. The other kind is for generating power and creating a stable base, heavy shoes. This is what Midoriya normally wears despite his movement being fast and flowy. Giving him options gives his fights more diversity besides just what weapon he has equipped. Different styles, like his new style violence, come with different benefits and drawbacks. Violence's stance is based on the little I know of sumo wrestling, something for honor players might remember ties in a little bit with the Kanabo. His old style won't be named for a while, but until I think of a real name I'ma call it Ghost Steps. I assume I'll just name styles after the first technique they're based on. The old style was based on the Ghost Steps walk, so the Ghost Step style. Is there a violence breathing? Yes, it's focused on a quick in and a slow out. It was mentioned but never named earlier. It's to put more force into the attack by breathing out on impact to tighten the core and inflict more damage. Is this a partial rip-off of Demon Slayer? Yes, but expect no lightning or fire dragons. This is more focused on the actual effects of the breathing, like meditative breathing for calming down, or violence breathing for getting the heart rate up and hitting harder. When will you update hero analysis for the future number 14, Ronin? When I have time to write, but not enough to write a chapter. Pretty much no one reads the other, so I'll focus on this. Back to color commentary, our first real cameo. I tried to base my Nezu off spoilers I vaguely remember, other fanfics, and what I thought he'd be like, aka Mickey Mouse on his last straw running a school of idiots for a public he loves, so he has to put up with them to create this one. He likes his employees but enjoys messing with them, and I believe he likes vigilantes and takes interest in people who should have been helped by heroes but weren't. That's about it, but the last 2 things are the attacks he learned, sidekick and jab. For those who regularly read these, you might remember I do box but I don't do kickboxing, taekwondo, or any kicking sport. All kicking is from what I learned in about 30 minutes practicing with YouTube and what I've heard it's supposed to look like. I heard some people wondering if he'd learn more kicks, and I think I put it in the notes before. If not, here's my answer. Yes, learn all of the kicks. Spinning back kicks, pushing forward kicks, side kicks, pumped up kicks. You better run, faster than my bullet. Chapter 19. Chapter summary. Midoriya has trained for 1 month to mop up the last of the chillers, who've been drifting ever since Mao was incarcerated. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. He had told his mom he'd be out late, and so he slept in as late as possible to try and conserve some energy or something. He wasn't a health expert. Today he woke up at 10, going to breakfast for something light. Being full wouldn't be helpful for now. Then he took a second to meditate and stretch, allowing himself some focus before going out to the planned building. Midoriya traveled quickly, using a discreet method that no one bothered to use anymore if ever the sewers. Going to the public archives hadn't been hard to look up building records, which he had done initially to research the buildings he'd be entering. Finding a map of the sewers had just been a bonus. He made sure to post his questions well in advance to avoid the vigilante numbskulls showing up. In his opinion, they should just stop before they got themselves hurt and do some more research. Besides the geniuses who wouldn't know what planning was if they got decked by an event planner, Midoriya's other worry was gangs. This part of the city was still pretty much just gangs and idiots trying to take them down. The police station was 10 minutes away, far enough for an easy getaway before anyone showed up, especially with the paperwork. Midoriya made good time in the sewers, if you didn't count how much he had to stop to pull out the map. In this maze of pipes and samey corridors, it all seemed to blur together to one mass of bad smells and dull sights, but after 20 minutes of stumbling through the dark with just a flashlight, he was there. He had scouted inside and above the sewers, modifying his map as necessary. It was 2 o'clock when he climbed from sewers into the old building with its own sewage access, why it did being one of the few things in the world Midoriya wasn't sure he wanted to know. A quick dust off, and he set up into watching the guard routes. This was the 5th time he'd done so, making sure they were evenly spaced. He made notes over the guards, watching for any hints of quirk usage. It didn't take long for the minute signs, but they were hard to read. He'd want to get the hard targets done with first, then move on to easier and easier opponents as he tired himself out. He let himself be lost in the notes as to not get bored. If he was going to space out, it'd be best to space out to something relevant. There were 20 guards right now that was supposed to be roaming around, but none of them really were. The discipline here was a lot worse, but if left alone, they might reform. Tonight was to make sure that didn't happen. He fit his helmet and brought out the cannabis, taking long slow steps. It was held one-handed by the right arm, resting the head against his shoulder while the rest of it pointed away from his body, his arm seeming to hang off it instead of supporting it. His left hand tense and relaxed, pushing against the sports wrap under his gloves. He emerged like a ghost in front of 3 members taking a smoke break. They weren't the purple cigarettes, but these 3 had been separated from their partners. If he took them down, their partners would come to him. It came from the alley with a club on its shoulder, wearing their former boss's coat and helmet. The gangsters were shaken as if seeing a ghost. It was like he busted out of jail just to beat their asses for slacking. The stature was different, but the attitude was the same. Completely relaxed when outnumbered, but as they realized the height difference, they figured out it was just some two-bit trying to fuck with them. That pissed them off. One of the men stomped out their cigarettes and approached him, already swearing. He had to be taken out before he got too loud. Midoriya twisted his body and performed the sidekick, twisting on his back leg and driving the sole of his left foot into the man's thigh as he was still coming closer. This pushed the man off balance, opening his upper body. Midoriya replanted his feet and grabbed the man by his shirt as he stumbled, giving a sharp tug to pull him towards his own right side in the cannabis, bringing the side of the pommel into the side of the man's head without ever letting the head of the cannabis leave his shoulder. The man recoiled from the blow and was hit by Midoriya's spinning back kick in the chest, shoving him back towards the others as he toppled over. Midoriya still walked forward, rolling his right shoulder. The side he had chosen to appear from was the one between them and the rest of the guards, meaning if they wanted to get any help they'd have to pass him. But this seemed to be an overestimation. Instead, they both charged at him simultaneously, trying to overwhelm him. Midoriya took his immovable stance, picking the goon coming from his right side. His right side had his cannabis, so it'd be easier to take him out first. Violent style, Form 3. Wall. Midoriya stepped forward as they charged, shoving his cannabis forward like a rapier into the man's stomach and pressing the pommel into his own shoulder for support. The man's momentum was lost in the impact, leaving him winded as the other man kept moving. Midoriya stepped sideways away from the attacker, drawing back his cannabis and bringing it up to build momentum. He pressed it further, the momentum coming back around in a full circle into the immobilized man's side, knocking him into his charging companion. They were lost for a moment as Midoriya brought the cannabis back up to his roof guard, muttering to himself. Violent style Form 1. Mindless violence. Midoriya stepped up and swung downward at the tangled opponents, pushing them down and back as he struck and stepped forward. Then, he returned the cannabis to its original position overhead and brought it down again, and took another step forward. He continued to bring it down while stepping forward for 7 more hits until his opponents were no longer standing. He sighed and brought the cannabis back against his shoulder. These guys were easy to deal with, but that was the point. This time, he wanted to try a frontal assault. Not charging and guns blazing, he wasn't crazy, but to see how he could do in a straight fight. He was trying to rise above heroes, and that's how most heroes did it. If he couldn't, who was he to call them out on their bullshit? Midoriya roamed the perimeter, finding the man looking for his partner, unaware he was standing right by the dumpster Midoriya had left his victims in. Speaking of the vigilante, he slowly stepped out, stretching his left arm. Last time was almost all legs and cannabis for the goons unlucky enough to get into his crosshairs, and it was time to share the experience. The man did search the dumpster, opening it up and peering inside right as Midoriya got to him. He took one hand off the lid to rummage through the trash right as Midoriya stood beside him, planting his left foot on the side of the dumpster to get a better stance for pulling, then grabbed him by the back of his shirt. The man was tugged backward and his hand let go of the dumpster lid as he was pulled back, and Midoriya's left foot shifted from being on the side of the dumpster to the flat ground for better traction. The man was trying to stop himself from going backward and wasn't ready for the momentum shift as Midoriya stopped pulling and shoved his head into the rim of the metal dumpster. He was probably unconscious before the lid bounced off his head. Midoriya didn't take any chances, stepping back and away in case of counterattacks. After a sharp jab from his cannabis and no movement, Midoriya shoved him into the trash too and went to work taking out the rest of the 16. Soon enough, they'd have to break apart. Some went to do their rounds, some went to the bathroom. No matter what, they met the strange man with a weird baseball bat in their leader's jacket. It wasn't until 8 were left that they noticed everyone wasn't coming back. They stupidly sent 4 out to scout, having them split up. Truly, horror movies were teaching the public nothing. The biggest Midoriya had taken up so far was 3, so he wanted to try 4. He smiled as he wiped the blood off his hand and walked towards the front entrance. To the nervous guards, a strange man carrying a bat was a clear threat. However, for some reason, the automatic door wasn't opening. It was like the electricity that was supposed to power it had been taken, and he was there before they could open it manually. He took on the people trying to open the doors first since they didn't have any arms to defend themselves. His entire body spun as his club struck the first man in the head, sending him reeling and rolling backward, unconscious in one. Midoriya turned his sideways momentum into the classic overhead violence, striking downward on the second man. His knees caved in and all 4 of his eyes went in separate directions as he slumped. Midoriya grabbed this man before he could fall, circling around to put the body between him and the other 2. One was already rushing him, but Midoriya shoved the body at him, tangling up his legs and making him fall face first towards Midoriya's waiting sidekick. There was a clean sound as the 2 met, his eyes also rolling back. Midoriya stood over the 3, all unconscious in a span of fewer than 5 seconds. The 4th was looking scared and nervous. Hey. Midoriya and the survivor exchanged a look as Midoriya turned his back on him. You know, if someone were to run all the way to the police station and alert them about some. He heard the movement before he even started talking. Midoriya didn't have to twist, making his spinning back kick technically just a back kick. It hit the survivor, who wasn't doing a very good job of surviving, in the ribs and sent him on his ass. Midoriya stood back up, raising his bat, overhead. He swung downward, done with the cheesy one-liners, at least while everyone was still awake. Interrupting someone while they're talking. The nerve of some people. Someone opened the door from the other side. Aye, what's the rack? Midoriya cut him off with his favorite overhead strike, letting him kiss the ground as Midoriya booked it. Nimari Kayama had been sitting around on boring rooftops for a month. In the mornings, she taught her classes. Afternoons, she was stuck shadowing an insomniac. Focus midnight, Nezu will surely give up. 6 months. That's still 7 months too long. She rubbed her eyes as she checked her phone, scrolling through the updates she got and purposely scrolling past any from Aizawa. Sure, he had a hero name, but it felt wrong to call him by it. Especially since that lazy prick didn't even come up with it himself. Damn, that name was good though. She got lost thinking about her high school days before noticing another text from the man himself. Opening the text, it only gave a location in the middle of fuck all. She grumbled as she remembered the no-car rule of being an underground hero and began to make her way over. It took 40 minutes of walking to get to the building alone, another 10 minutes to get to the roof. Midnight was not used to all this walking. In bursts, she was fine, but this was torture. On the roof, the man still in his rebellious emo face squatted on the edge of the building. She practiced sneering and making faces at him as she approached until he addressed her. There's been an upset in one of the 6 gangs, the Chillers. They're all going to a set of warehouses, those 3 down there. I thought I was on vigilante duty, not gang duty. She'd done gang duty before plenty of times. She'd say she's great at dealing with gangs. A warehouse was a little too big for her quirk to be effective though. This could be a vigilante activity, or it could just be a meeting. You deal with this stuff all the time, why'd you call me? There is a vigilante, but it might not be yours. He adjusted his binoculars, Midnight wondering if she could cover the ends in ink without him noticing. The dark ring around his eye would fit right in. This one doesn't have a sword and seems a lot dumber. Attacking head-on, at this time of day. A rookie vigilante if I ever saw one. So we're going to be saving the rookie more than getting mine. She rolled her eyes. I'll need almost 10 minutes to get that whole place asleep. There had to be better options than me. Yes, but I know you've been spending the time you were supposed to be investigating vigilantes investigating cafe menus. Shut up about this, and I'll shut up about that. He was better than he looked, but given how he looked, almost anything was. She grumbled but went back down with him, walking towards the warehouses. He normally took faster routes, but her heels didn't allow for that. Aizawa almost immediately regained his sneaking height while she was stuck ducking between alleys, grumbling. They stepped up to the open warehouse, planning it out. I'll enter from the top. When I give you the signal you start flooding the warehouse. Got it. Midnight didn't like being treated like a sidekick. It'd be easier to just flood the room, but no. She had to wait. Whatever, she nodded and went along with. She walked around the building while she waited, making sure all the windows were closed before she started to set up intel. What the hell? What? Endeavor beat you did again. Endeavor stealing one of Aizawa's captures was a fun spot to poke, especially since Aizawa spent 7 hours chasing the villain only for them to accidentally pass by Endeavor who took him out in under 10 seconds. She did wonder in the back of her mind if it was something serious, but the gang was the Chillers. The only good member they had was in police custody already. No, they're all unconscious. That vigilante must have taken them all out. What? That's bullshit. They were outside this place 10 minutes ago. How many people were in there? 10? 15? Around 50. She went around and came in herself to see the carnage. People were sent flying everywhere, strewn over railing and boxes. Objects had fallen atop people, with blood and teeth littering the floor like candy wrappers. Aizawa had come down from the rafters. Almost every one of them has a hit to the head. The weapon might be different, but the precision is the same. What? My target's trying out new weapons. Aizawa rolled his eyes. He probably always used more than one weapon. Most criminals who rely on weapons carry multiple in case of emergencies. She stopped, nodding as it came together in her head. Last time had been a stealth mission, this seemed more run and gun style. Then she realized something else. Isn't he just in the next warehouse over right now? Aizawa rolled his eyes. Hopefully, he's just in the next warehouse over right now, but I'm not sure you are a good match for someone who can hit this hard and quickly. Your quirk wouldn't have time to take effect, and if he rushes you we don't have anything solid to stop him. Aizawa dragged her all the way out here just to dismiss her. Earlier, she would have been happy to leave, but now she was offended. We are going to see what this stupid musclehead can really do, then we'll decide who's staying and who's not a good match. You ever thought that if their quirk isn't muscle that you can't do anything either? Aizawa was going to the next warehouse already, and she was pressed to keep up with him while going over all the bodies. She did have the sense to alert the police now, they could take care of these small fries. One of us is trained in martial arts. The other is dressed like a stripper dominatrix. She huffed at how he was right. It always drove her crazy when people dismissed her for her costume, but she needed it like this for her quirk to be effective. Midoriya was running in circles. It was miles more effective than he thought it'd be, letting them chase him. He took strange routes, let them crash into each other and tire themselves out. Then as they caught their breath, he would sneak in a couple of hits. There were only 20 left and he was on top of a shelf. He put his kanabo away in 2 pieces and looked down at the people below him. He eyed the mattresses that gave him this idea, scooting a little closer. Finally, he reached the top and began to shake the entire shelf. The goon's panic is its base, not bolted to the ground for God knows why, raised and lowered before tipping a little too far. Midoriya jumped, falling 40 feet onto the mattresses and bouncing off like it was a trampoline, managing to land a second bounce on the mattresses before his slightly less graceful contact with the floor. He rose sharply, ready to fight, but everyone was either pinned or unconscious. Midoriya sighed as he started checking up, making sure no one was dead. The highest person had been 15 feet up when the whole thing tipped, but there were signs of possible contusions. He gave everyone a 5-second rundown and 1-minute treatment before bailing out the window, running across the road, and jumping up onto a dumpster. Last one. All of this had to be done in under 10 minutes, and he'd say he was making great time. He hit the window, but then climbed to his right so his entrance point wouldn't be the window right above the dumpster. When he was 5 windows over, he took out the pommel and broke the window, hooking the clasp and pulling it up as he hopped inside. The dynamic duo hadn't heard the crash but could see the effects. They were slowed down by doing a checkup on the villains since there was no villain or vigilante in front of them. As long as they weren't, these downed civilians were the #1 priority. As they finished getting people unpinned and making sure no one died, they heard an explosion from the next over the warehouse. I think we've done all we can to help these people, Eraserhead. He nodded as they ran to the final building, then stopped as the door blew off. What seemed to be villains went flying out, smoke flowing out of the warehouse, making Midnight shout out again, unable to contain herself. An explosion quirk, in that close of quarters. That vigilante's nuts. It's probably a villain. If it was his quirk, he would probably use it more. Aizawa was an expert on fighting with quirks, and when people started using them. This guy seems to have some sort of agility one, or maybe strength. Something subtle, by how nothing looks completely unordinary. They ran towards the smoke as Midnight called the fire department too, cursing herself for being stuck as the messenger. Midoriya was bouncing between 2 villains, humming to himself as the 2 idiots did most of his job for him. And for free, what great partners, unlike those dipshits vigilantes. One breathed another blast of fire as Midoriya stepped under a ledge, the sheer force of the explosion sending the railing everywhere. Did I get him? Well, I think you got about everyone here. Midoriya had waited until he came too close, shoving a propane tank in his mouth and throwing him face first down while he jumped away. Sure enough, the villain used his quirk again. His skull was clearly blast-proof, but the blowback sent him spiraling into the wall while his second favorite villain created another glowing whip, cutting through the air wrapping around the tank just behind where Midoriya had been. Stop moving, damn it. He was a short ball of fat, unlike the usual image of people using whips. Whatever, Midoriya had already been scolded by Mao for being quirkiest. He should really get over himself. He ran forward, grabbing things with his left to throw in the whip's path, including the last of the villains. It was just 4 villains in Midoriya by the time he hit the whip man, who had been so furious he hadn't thought about moving away from the maniac with a spiky baseball bat. Start moving, damn it. He turned his rush into a baseball swing, planting his left with toes pointing at the man. The Kanabo came back as he gave him a baseball swing, uppercutting him off the floor and into boxes. Midoriya returned to his usual stance with the Kanabo and looked at the last villains. They'd been hit but not taken out by the electric whip. He smiled as he started to walk towards the last 3 villains to finish the job. After this, he could call the cops to make sure they were coming and book. Freeze, villains. Time seemed to stop as a woman's voice cut through the air. Don't move, the heroes are here. Midnight, the R-rated hero, stood at the doorway. She looked confident, but Midoriya recognized feigned confidence from anywhere. After all, it was most of what he had. Thank God, we give up. The gangsters dropped their weapons and ran to her, idiotically running past Midoriya. If he was the petty sort, he'd trip them for all the pain they caused him. Instead, he continued walking forward, like he always had. Everyone else stopped when she arrived, but not Midoriya, because Midoriya remembered her quirk, and the second she stood at the only open airway this became a time trial. Already the other villains were getting tired, but they were only 30 feet in closing from her. She noticed finally the small shadow slipping away and called him out. Hey, stop moving, get him. Get him, means she's not alone. But who would she work with? Her quirk makes it difficult for most heroes to partner with her. Some strange hobo dropped in front of him, but Midoriya didn't even stop for that. Whatever he was. The man was wearing goggles and a gray scarf that seemed to come up on its own. A capture scarf. That narrowed it down to 3. He didn't look like his body was smoke, so it was Eraserhead or Ninja. He didn't look like a Christian nun, so probably Eraserhead. Midoriya knew that Eraserhead's powers worked on his eyes, and the goggles didn't seem to have lenses, meaning his ultimate weapon was still good. He'd heard of it from legends across the internet, spoken in whispers. Almost every fighting video had one person who mentioned this ancient move, the original bitch move. Joke style, Form 2, Pocket Sand. Midoriya whispered as he threw the sand into the hero's face, immediately switching to but not screaming the name of Joke style, Form 1. A bizarre family technique, running away like a bitch. Midoriya bolted for where he knew the sewer access would be in this warehouse, the far corner left side from the entrance. Eraserhead had to take off his goggles to get the sand out of his eyes. Midnight was too far away to do anything, and he slipped into the sewers like an adolescent mutated Japanese spy terrapin. Midnight just sat there open-mouthed as the vigilante bolted into a corner, having to make sure the 3 that came towards her were asleep. Aizawa, are you Alrig PFFT? Are you alright? She was keeping it together pretty well, for how stupid the scene was. Aizawa was rubbing his eyes, muttering curses, and then getting out his eyedropper. Fucking slippery little. The whole thing was a little funny, but seeing Aizawa get beat by this was pretty funny. Come on, Eraserhead, we gotta get these guys out of the fire. They spent the next 10 minutes dragging villains out of the barely burning warehouse, just in case it started spreading. Aizawa was right, the explosion had been one of the villains. He was in pretty good condition, all things considered, like the giant blast mark around his face. It wasn't hard to imagine how he created explosions. The police and fire department took over the last of the villains, and it'd be about 20 minutes before they could go in. He ditched us pretty well for, what was it? Some dumb rookie. Aizawa muttered as he used his eyedropper again. Yeah, there's no proof of what his quirk actually is, only suspicions. All evidence he used his quirk could be passed off as good training or was blown up. Plus, that exit, you know where that hatch leads. Midnight thought for a moment, then took an optimistic approach. A basement, so he, still down there and we can pick him up in 20 minutes. Aizawa shook his head and said the worst answer. Sewers. She grimaced and flinched at the thought. Her quirk was heavily suppressed with all the fumes, and it was just disgusting. She shivered, and Eraserhead finally offered her some comfort. Don't worry, the trail's long since dead. We're done here, all that's left is the paperwork. She relaxed, before groaning slightly. They walked away back towards UA, and maybe to get a taxi on the way. At least it's not sewers. Chapter and notes. This chapter was supposed to go up last night. Guess whose internet was down for 10 hours and was too lazy to finish typing it without his spell check? This guy. Actual story stuff now. Remember, fighting a group of about 4 more than you is practically impossible. Don't do it, or it will seem stupid. There is one exception to this, which is hit-and-run tactics. Hit-and-runs are easier the larger the size gap between the parties, like how in the third warehouse the villains were implied to have done all the fighting for Midoriya. Fast facts, Midoriya didn't actually beat anyone other than the 2 overly destructive gangsters. For fighting style, if you look up what people using the Kanabo look like, it's basically a warhammer mixed with a baseball bat. Stealth is very difficult since the motions to get enough power behind it are very big. It is possible, but not easy for a newbie like Midoriya. Because it's not easy is why Midoriya took on the Chillers. Each of the gangs has its own upsides, and the Chillers was having Mao. With Mao and the Toxin Lovers the previously weakest gone, they're the new weakest. Next up, more cameos. Midnight will probably be a reoccurring character so I can add her to the tags. Aizawa might be until he gets a class. Time-wise, this is the year he kicked his entire class out of UA, so right now he has the free time to mess with Midoriya. Another fun thing, we're in what I consider the second arc, and Ronin still hasn't been name dropped. Isn't that whack? This is his second major appearance to the public and only a very small amount of the public. He will be getting more famous soon. I hope I'm keeping the martial arts accurate to what they're supposed to be. I just recently got told how 2 kicks work but neither one was in this chapter. The front kick will be though, don't worry. We have about 1 fight a chapter right now, but that might start to slow down soon. I'm just glad I could mix some other perspectives in, get a little practice before this gets complicated. Enjoy your lives amigos, and remember gravity only works if you believe in it. Chapter 20. Chapter 20. Chapter summary. Midoriya narrowly avoids capture by ripping off anime, but still wins the fight. Without doing most of the work. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya was a little glad he didn't have to leave the usual way since he stole a propane tank. It would be a little weird trying to hide it when he changed outfits, but right now. In the sewers, who'd notice? He followed what he remembered for 10 minutes before checking where he was on the map. The fire should give him a head start, and if the fire department showed up an even bigger start. The hero rules didn't allow them to leave people in burning buildings, and nobody would fail to point out how easy it was to move the gangsters. From there, the hero code would stop them from chasing him until the fire department gave them the all clear. Truly, his biggest strength this time had been his memorization of all the hero rules. He knew more than most heroes, including the norms, expectations, and why both existed. Still, Midoriya didn't think he'd need that on this operation. Fuck. Why are they here? There should have been no heroes near here. He did all the research and crunched all the numbers. No hero patrol was within 5 minutes of here. He took out the first warehouse in 2 minutes, the second in 3, and the third in under 2 minutes. Well, the gangsters took themselves out in under 2 minutes. It was a variable he couldn't understand, and if he didn't know why it happened it could come back to bite him in the ass. More research would need to be done, but if he focused on those 2 heroes maybe it'd lead him to understand why they were there. There was probably something else they were there for since the response time was too quick. The police would be alerted at the same time as the heroes, but the police almost always show up first. Did the heroes just happen to be in the area? It was too big of a coincidence. They were looking for something, and he unluckily got in their way. Were the heroes looking for him? On his second hit, when he looked completely different. Improbable. He checked his map once again and came out near his favorite abandoned office, nodding hello to the local homeless and heading inside. He did actually know a few of their names now, but they still didn't know his. Inside, he stored the propane tank inside his favorite workshop, checking everything over before leaving. He went back into the sewers and went to a more secluded area, changing in the sewers as uncomfortable as it was, and started making his way home. He had achieved his goal. He tested himself in a head-on fight and found out that it was unreasonable to try and take out gangs on his own. Some of the members had called for backup, meaning that if he stayed there he'd have to fight even more people. There was a point when it stopped being a fight and became an endurance test, and he was pretty sure he'd hit it in those warehouses. Teaming up with other vigilantes wouldn't be too bad, maybe he could even teach them a thing. No, it was pretentious to think he could teach them. He was just a young rookie himself, and what he saw was probably the middle-bottom tier of vigilantes. Real vigilantes wouldn't need to rely on their enemies to supply themselves with weapons. He pushed these thoughts from his head as he stepped inside, announcing that he'd need to take a shower before he gave any hugs, and went to wash off. Sue, Dr. led with, looking out over the room. Devil Doll was checking her hair for any burn spots. Flipper was checking her hat for bullet holes. Ghosty was the best off of the 6, easing himself into a chair and muttering curses at the source his apples couldn't help. Yee, it went like shit. Clash had his coat lying on his chair, rotating his arm to check its flexibility. Going straight up wasn't exactly comfortable right now. Long story short, we're disorganized as shit. It's still better than being on our own. Ghosty shuddered at the days before Doctor's healing. His apples might not seem like much, but they could fix anything short of death itself. This was met with nods and grunts as they agreed. You know what would help? The unluckiest girl in the world, Flipper spoke. Online, she seemed extremely confident and lazy, but she broke down the second she had to do things in the real world. Years of her own bad luck undermining her saw to that. That's why so many people listened to her. She rarely spoke or did anything, unless she was sure she could remove all luck from it or it was necessary. She coughed to clear her throat to speak better, not wanting to choke again while giving a speech. That guy with the sword from the Little Musudafu decapitation. Devil Girl, the third person there, nodded. He seemed to have his shit together. From the reports Ghosty stole, he took down most of the whole gang on his own. A whole gang? Clash was in disbelief. By himself? What kind of vigilante is packing that power these days? I think it might be a fake, sent to lure us out. Ghosty was adjusting himself, trying to find a spot to sit that didn't hurt as much. It's possible, but they're still keeping it under pretty tight wraps. That information was for hero eyes only. Even the police weren't supposed to know about that. Whatever, if he's a spy he's the worst one ever. He's only been seen once. The second oldest member spoke, chewing on his cigar. He ain't spying shit right now. Doctor nodded, then adjusted his head. I agree, if we could find him he would be useful, but we must take precautions. Let tonight remind us of the dangers of not doing so. With those as the final formal closing words, the group descended into more relaxed chatter, while a mix of ideas stewed in their heads. Midoriya sat in class, unsuccessfully spinning a pencil but successfully launching it off into the distance. He probably wasn't going to get that back. Oh well, he needed to focus. Specifically, he knew what weapon he wanted, but not a clue how to make it. The weapon was the quarterstaff, which he'd turned into a spear. The problem was all in storage. For his kanabo, he could just make them screw together. For the quarterstaff, part of its appeal was its flexibility. It needed to be able to bend, something the screw method would stop. It needed to stab, which an extendable staff couldn't do well. Between the two though, the screwing method was looking better. The wood or metal could be worked to be more flexible than normal, but he'd prefer to be able to stab. Until he got a miracle third method, it'd be better to give up flexibility for storage. This would mean more planks, and with that more screwing things in. However, Midoriya did have a new method he wanted to try that'd make it more dangerous. Something hit him, disturbing his thoughts. Bakugo was looking down at him, having bumped into him. Midoriya matched his angry eyes, the heat of his anger meeting cool disapproval. They both snapped back, with Bakugo throwing another quirkless slur his way. Midoriya didn't care, as he was pretty sure right now he was beating Bakugo at his precious fight record. Bakugo didn't take on 50 guys at once and win even if he took only cheap shots, ran in circles for a minute and slammed people into each other and stomped on them. Midoriya ignored those small details. A victory was a victory, and he only cared about staying on top. He'd been a bottom feeder, and it was a cruel life he was determined to never become again. He'd take every victory he could get, and if he couldn't get it, he'd steal it. Somebody had been saving his money, and it was for this day. Midoriya had more ideas than just spears and quarterstaves. The secret was that this spear was probably the cheapest weapon he'd ever make, so he could afford to blow his money on other things, less directly helpful things. The bulletproof vests had vexed him for long enough. None of them fitting, not one of working. Now was time to start fixing that. His major project was fixing one of the vests so it actually blocked bullets, and he knew how he wanted to do it. From the craft store he bought rough cloth that could take the stress and wear. Next up was the padding to put inside it to keep it fit to his body and protect him from impacts. But he couldn't work on one project for long, and right now the spear came before the best. Midoriya created what would be the shaft of the spear, 3 2-foot-long planks. Next, he tested the screw-ins he created to keep everything attached, each screw attached to a connector that'd be placed at the end of the rod. It wasn't like a screw nail, but like a twist and attach. At the end of the screw-in and the bottom of the connector, a magnet. This would help the parts stick together. The metal connectors would last longer. All in all, this should last a while. If it was effective, next time he remade his kanabo he'd add this stuff in. For now, he was cutting it to attach the ends tightly and screwing them in, before hammering and smelting the screws flat. The magnets were also screwed in and flattened in place, although he had to add those screw holes to the ends himself. He put it all together, testing the balance. The reason for the magnets wasn't just to keep it tight and locked, but to balance the weight. This was closest to the middle he'd ever gotten. Next up was burning the wood, a practice he had contemplated doing with the cannabis, but it would waste too much time. This though, all it took was an hour to make 3 of these things. He wasn't going to get much better practice. A total of 5 spear rods were broken and burned in his attempt to properly burn the wood hard. When he got one great, one good, and one close enough, he called it good enough. There was no way he'd have enough time today to apply the wood hardener, so instead, he sewed on the new sheets for the spear pieces. This would hold them in place by the sockets, which slightly protruded from the body. Still, they were pretty done. He spun the full length around his hands like a member of the color guard, before sending it also flying into the wall. He winced, walking over to pick it up. Even useless things like spinning it was pretty difficult. Midoriya packed up shop, eager to get to work tomorrow and finish the work. The improved jacket could be done tomorrow. Midoriya dipped out, heading home. He hadn't told his mom he'd be late, and he didn't want. She heard him stop moving up ahead. Catching up quickly, she saw the path split in 4 ways, up included. Since she couldn't see him at first glance, it was obvious where he was. She laughed, tensing her legs and jumping up, aiming to hit him just beneath the sewer gap. It was dark, and she couldn't hear his breathing, so he was obviously holding his breath, and then something rose from the sewage below. He looked disgusting, rising from the filth as she rose off the ground. She no longer had anything to move with, leaving herself open to attacks. Maruko was most open when she was in the air, something she was often. From the sewage rose a strange pull she didn't remember in the report that jabbed her in the thigh. It was a hard hit, and he used it to push off and backward. Her momentum disturbed, she hit the top of the sewer ladder roughly and fell onto the sewer walkway, her top half getting covered in sewage. Something came down on the back of her head, forcing her under. She could barely hear its voice. Quote. You lack creativity. She went to flip herself up, but as she went the pole struck the back of her head again and threw her off balance. She stumbled backward, spitting to make sure nothing got in her mouth. Her nose was killing her now, and she regretted the white. Her hair was a mess. The pole struck her in the stomach and the throat. It was hard to breathe as the air had been pushed out. It didn't take much force to kill someone. Hits normally cause the injured part to swell up, and if the inside of the throat swelled up too much and close, that wasn't much to save someone at that point. Quote. You don't know how to kick properly. The man taunted her again from within the sewage, stepping back and away. Did he think she was scared of getting dirty? She wasn't some prissy bitch. She pushed off the wall at him as he lowered the staff into the sewage, then bringing it up as she dove at him. The sewage got on her face, in her eyes and nose, and the pole struck her body and pushed her off balance again. She fell completely, finding the sewage wasn't even up to her thighs. This guy had hidden in only 2 feet of this shit just to ambush her. Quote. You keep repeating mistakes. He stepped forward, another representative of the jabs to her stomach and at her face, but this time she blocked with her arm. She wasn't ready for him to one-hand the pole and bring it splashing down into the sewage to block off her view. Her instincts made her close her eyes and mouth just as he switched to a better weapon for the occasion. No adaptability. The cannabis bounded down onto her head. She reeled as the force came down on her ears, a very sensitive part of her body. The pole didn't have the weight to do anything to them, but the cannabis had the power to take advantage of her weakness. Quote. Is this your first fight against a martial artist? She screamed as she dove forward, her ears ringing. She ran into his immovable stance in violent style form 3, wall. His cannabis was a straight post that didn't allow her to get any closer, the pommel resting against his body as the head dug into her stomach. Her own momentum hurt both of them, but only one of them was wearing cushioned armor that had now been soaked. This villain had the weight to defend against her attacks. Following her push forward, he let wall slip, grabbing her by the ear and slamming bike helmet into skull. This villain's pretty close to my height. The villain shoved her back, using the cannabis like a spear with the technique he just learned. Quote. I am honored to be your first real martial artist opponent, but I think this is over. He withdrew, right as she decided she might not kill him and just instead beat out of him the answers for where he was learning all this shit. He turned his back to her, walking away. What? Turning his back on her? Who'd he think she was? She ran forward to tackle him and bring him down as he stepped back into it, slamming the cannabis into her right ankle. Crack. Her world shifted, things seemed red and her head swam. Normally, this wouldn't be that bad, but this was the ankle she had been putting her superhuman strength into. She herself broke it even more. If you keep fighting, this will be your last fight ever on that leg. I think you'd rather save it for someone a little more important than some random vigilante you don't know the name of. The advice was sound, and something clicked, like why he never seemed to go for kill shots. Plus, now that she knew he could break her ankles, she'd be on guard. Right now, she could definitely win this fight, but he was right still. She could win, but she might not walk right again if that bad thing hit her, let alone kick. You're a vigilante. The hell is the crime rate here to need a guy like you? She tried to remember the recruitment lines she heard when she was training. Shit, she thought they were dumb and didn't pay attention. Worse, she still thought they were dumb as fuck and her brain was actively trying to forget them. Wait, I messed it up. What's your name again? He didn't even stop as he walked. I'll call an ambulance for you. Don't worry about being stuck, they'll come in about 10 minutes. Fuck, I asked your name, you goddamn villain. Not about some fucking ambulance. She struggled up, trying not to put weight on her leg. He finally looked back, laughing slightly. Maruko, I'm just some wandering blade. I don't get a name. With that confusing as fuck line, the mystery vigilante left. She managed to get all the way to the ledge as the ambulance sirens came into her listening distance, only 2 minutes after he left. Her face was scrunched up as she pulled her legs out, still thinking. But seriously, the fuck is the crime rate that he's considered a vigilante? Mao stepped out from the prison, smiling wide as the horizon. His benefactor, the guy who pulled him from Portugal to get some experience here, was apparently a strong guy. He got Mao out of jail in a little over a month even with his usual record. He looked left and right for his ride, smiling as purple smoke came into view from nothing. Mao laughed as he power strutted on through. Looks like his boss had come to pick him up after all. Chapter end notes. I must start at the top of the chapter and get to the 2 big ending points eventually. Midoriya doesn't have intel on himself, so he doesn't know what the public thinks or knows about him. This was brought up in the end fight where, unlike every other character in MHA, he doesn't have a name. This was done as a reflection of his ideal in this sentient chicken nugget's opinion, the nameless hero. The vigilantes. They're all original as far as I know, but I only watch the anime except for some things, like the final fight. A lot of people are looking for Midoriya, but everyone who ever tried to remember a song with no lyrics will know it's hard to find something with no name did. The quarter spear, technically a tri-spear, but Midoriya is currently learning spear fighting but will learn some actual quarterstaff techniques soon. Remember, Midoriya only picked up the quarterstaff because it was so easy to apply it to the spear. It attaches in technically the same way as the kanabo, but the connectors are metal to avoid wear and tear. The magnets are just excessive, but a test for a growing hero. The bulletproof vest. The cushioning got ruined in its first fight. Maybe next time Midoriya will pick the watertight fabric and remember to back up his sewing with glue. Still, it did its job, allowing him to take the force of fighting the final fight. Maruko. Boy, do I like her. She's most of the things I made Mao to be, but a hero. She's one of the best, and that's why Midoriya winning the fight would be bullshit. Most of the time when fighting a superior opponent, you can inflict some serious damage if you stop trying to protect yourself and go for injury. It's beyond mutual damage, it's more like a Pyrrhic victory. That is when it becomes so costly to win something it stops being worth the effort. For example, Maruko could have totally finished the fight in the sewers, but she might not ever be able to fight with that leg again. Right now, there should be bones in her ankle that are powder. Maruko's loss came from her general lack of knowledge. From what I've seen of her, she doesn't actually know any martial arts despite being one of the heroes who would benefit the most. Her post on the fandom's wiki lists her with it, but I personally have never seen any scenes with her using a real martial art attack. I have seen her interrupt martial artists, but never learn any herself. I could be wrong, in which case I think this is the first time I nerfed someone in my fanfic. That's my beat. This victory was more along the idea of, I am definitely going to lose, I'm just going to make sure you don't win. Oh hey, Mao's out of jail, look at that. Chapter 21. Chapter 21. Chapter summary. Midoriya just beat Maruko, sort of, kind of, Midoriya just survived Maruko. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya walked towards the ladder up with as much confidence as he could, stopping only to disassemble his kanabo before he climbed up. He couldn't look back, because he didn't want Maruko to notice something a little weird. She might not be the most observant hero, but he was sure even she'd figure it out. When Midoriya had broken her ankle, he'd broken the outside of her right ankle. That wasn't too weird, it was her lead leg and a better target. That is until he remembered that Midoriya would have to hold the kanabo in his left hand to make that hit. Something he never practiced. Climbing the ladder was very awkward because Midoriya was positive she had dislocated his right shoulder and sprained his right wrist when he stopped her from rushing him. For all his precautions, she was just too powerful. When Midoriya got above ground, he legged it. Midoriya went to the forest he usually trained in, coming up with a cover story along the way. He went to the stream and washed off, then stored everything away there. He had a plan, but going to golf was gonna be impossible now. Damn. He called his mom, explaining that he fell out of a tree and onto his right arm. He was on his way home, and she greeted him, and together they went to the hospital right there and then. It was a little bit of a wait. Seems like doing stupid shit, like fighting one of the top 10 heroes, was very common on the weekend. When they went in, some doctors told him what he already knew and reprimanded him, then gave him a sling for his shoulder and told him to put ice on constantly. They were then sent the bill for shit Midoriya could have figured out himself and sent on their way. At least he got to miss another week of school, or at least switched to online again. Bakugo had fucked him up way worse than this all the time, but now he was getting to rest at home while doing his work. Today though, he needed a shower. After convincing his mom he could do it himself, he found out he probably should have just taken the help. Still, he washed the last of the sewage smell off. He felt like a rat before, now he was a nice clean rat. He looked in the mirror. Green hair covered his eyes, still dripping water. He grabbed the mess with his left, holding it into a top knot and making faces into the mirror for a minute before putting his pants on and needing help with the rest. His mom got his shirt, and he went straight to bed. Well, straight to meditation then bed. It was the old 30-minute meditation. He had some things to think about now. It was clear that some things had not gone well. Namely, he wasn't good enough at running away to ditch Maruko. Funnily enough, he finally wanted to go to the gym to learn parkour but physically couldn't. Another thing was that all his stuff was in a forest for safety's sake. He'd have to grab it tomorrow actually, no one ever went there. That might be a safer spot than here if his mom decided to clean while he was out. It wouldn't last forever, but for a week. That should be fine. He needed to move as little as possible to speed this recovery up. 17 days for his wrist, if past was to repeat, and 9 weeks for the shoulder. It was weird how he knew how long most of this took to heal from experience, he didn't even need to look it up anymore. Going to sleep was a little awkward, but it still wasn't as hard as the time he had 2 casts. Now, that was annoying. I be tellin' ya, this motherfucker got the sheet ya know. Mao laughed, drinking another glass of water. His stupidity and recklessness made him probably the only person to carelessly laugh in the man's presence. He be diving and driving, you see. This motherfucker wasn't fightin', bitch was fucking dancin'. His accent came through even harder as he got excited. The man was impressed by someone who could impress his 5th contingent plan this much. Mao had been handpicked to be the heir to Gigantomachia. Their quirks were practically the same, but instead of willpower, he used his own excitement. Such excitement was slightly annoying. A Nomu couldn't use his quirk because they weren't smart enough to activate it. Nomus couldn't get excited, and so couldn't do anything with it. He knew because he tried, and Mao hadn't even noticed. This bitch got some sort of analysis quirk or something, he be planning all this shit from the second he sees ya. Mao was still rambling on, with no regard for the time or place. All I know is bitch got green hair wait. Green hair, analysis quirk, good at predictions. The very rusty cogs in Mao's head made their annual 2 turns a year right now as he contemplated the person he was talking about. Quote ... Is Sendipider, Sir Night Eye's secret love child or something? Truly, Mao's quirk was custom built for him. Strong enough to start building excitement, confident enough to challenge anyone, and dumb enough to not feel fear. It was this quirk that had challenged him and he thought could be a backup to kill All Might. If his quirk was led to build up enough excitement, he could probably be at the same level as the number 1 fool, although it might take several days to get there. Mao's death from the fight was near certain, but he'd be unnecessary after killing All Might. Besides, dying from someone strong was Mao's wish anyway, he'd probably love it. If he knew who All Might was. Come on, just let me chase this guy down. I just need to fight another 17 rounds with him. Mao was still going on and on about the guy who beat him. His intel showed the heroes were interested in him as well, and if nothing else pissing off the heroes was a great opportunity. Find him, bring him to me, alive please. The man adjusted in his seat, beckoning with a finger. Kurogiri, send Mr. Mao somewhere discreet after giving him some more appropriate clothing. Midoriya slipped out from doing his work to grab his things. It was all still where he left it, as untouched as he thought. This was really a great place to leave things. Midoriya was going to leave, but he kinda wanted to get in some practice. Ever since he started, he'd been training. Going for 9 weeks without training was driving him insane. He kept the sling on to hold his arm as he moved, finding his kicking tree. Midoriya bounced on his feet slightly, then went into a side kick. He followed up by going into a pushing front kick, then switching legs for the spinning back kick. The tree didn't flinch, but the movement felt good. Midoriya smiled and adjusted his sling, then grabbed his stuff. I am coming from the forest like a SNE aka bitch. Mao erupted from the forest, straight down the hill before landing in the stream. He kicked off the water, coming back in front of Midoriya. He stood towering, showing off the tattoos and muscles. His arms showed no sign of the former flaying, and his smile was as confident as ever. Yo yo you, Senpiter, I get to see you again. He did a double take as he noticed Midoriya's arm. What, you got injured? He was cut off by a spinning back kick, forcing him back and flinging him down the hill again. While he flicked his dreadlocks out his hair, Midoriya was booking it. Sheet, you see in that sheet smoky. Kurogiri knew Mao's quirk and its powers. After fighting for 1 hour, ordinary strength couldn't do anything to him. 3 hours, most weapons stopped working. At 7, guns and lesser super strength felt like a breeze to him. At 15, he was nearly invincible. He stopped needing food, sleep, and oxygen. He would die if he didn't get any before he calmed down, but what was more strange was right now. Mao's record for getting excited was against his master at 12 seconds. Right now, he entered stage 1 by being hit instead of being the aggressor. If nothing else, this child was good for Mao. Mao ran into the forest, immediately getting lost but crashing through the forest. He didn't bother covering his body, entering stage 2 as the branches broke on his body. Kurogiri watched him run around screaming, wondering how long he should let him run as he noticed Midoriya slip back. Midoriya seemed to only run 10 to 12 feet into the forest and hid, letting Mao run right past him. Mao's power seemed to be extremely exploitable to the young child. Kurogiri wasn't just here to take that uncouth imbecile around, but to report on whatever or whoever it was he found so interesting. Seeing him attack to provoke Mao's quirk, then hiding as Mao did most of the running away for him. It was weird to share anything with Mao, but he too was interested. The small child quietly left while calling the police. Kurogiri would pick up Mao before they arrived, and even if he didn't, Mao right now wasn't something the local heroes could take. He was the heir of Gigantomachia and being groomed to be the gun of their master. He headed for the homeless district. Was it where he lived? The sling he would have gotten from a hospital, so it's unlikely. He entered an office building across the street and beneath Kurogiri. He contemplated his actions, adjusted his suit, and went forward. Right as he formed, a combination of wood and metal was driving at his face. He teleported backward. A warp quirk, why not? The boy held a strange bat-like device and attempted to drive it into Kurogiri's face. In no way a knockout or lethal blow, but still painful to the average person. He stood slightly beyond the doorway, not allowing traditional movement to get past him. His expression was dark, knowing that with Kurogiri's warp quirk physical space and confinement were the least of his worries. Then he dove in, attempting to thrust it like a rapier into his body. It wasn't a bad attempt. With Kurogiri's movement, any defense was near impossible, so he attacked. Kurogiri judged the distance but still got clipped as the child, Senpiter, adjusted his grip, switching from holding his bat by the middle to the end as it struck Kurogiri's body. The force was small, but he was already doing better than Mao, who spent hours swinging wildly before he just brought the room down on them, still missing, and got him by pretending to be knocked out. Shigaraki had never successfully hit him. Whatever his name was, the child then pushed him downward, trying to force him back and onto the floor with his weaker arm. Kurogiri went with it and fell through the floor, appearing behind him. He turned to grab the child. Crack. The bat had spun around, this time getting a powerful hit on Kurogiri. Appearing directly behind for maximum turning time, generic tactic with little thought. You don't fight much. The longer this fight went, the more the child seemed to know. If Kurogiri was willing to show more of his hand, he could capture the child. Right now, however, he wasn't supposed to. He wasn't even supposed to do this. It was time to withdraw. The child maintained eye contact with him as he left. He could double back, he could succeed eventually. Right now though, this was Mao's mission. He hated unprofessionalism, and stealing another credit was a prime example. He warped back before the idiot demolished the whole city, leaving them with just a strange area of destruction. A clearing had been formed not even 2 miles from the city. For some reason as well, the pro-hero Centipeder was alerted that his name could be heard for miles from the grotto. Midoriya was nearly shitting himself. How was Mao out? Who was that foggy guy? Why was he following him? Was he Mao's boss, meaning he was another gangster? They were together, so logically they knew each other. They would probably know each other from their jobs. The purple fog man had very little fighting experience or very little finesse with his quirk. Teleporting behind someone, that was the first place anyone would check. Above them was better for getting a physical jump, and appearing on their non-dominant side was good too. Most people tended to turn to their dominant side. He waited an hour before heading home and got caught by his mom. He apologized, making some small jokes to calm her down. He had left the bag of stuff outside, knowing he was probably going to get caught. After his mom went to bed, he got back up and grabbed it, bringing it inside. In the meantime, he had a lot of thinking to do. It was the second time he thought about retirement in his career, to think vigilantism was a career. Still, judging by his track record, he didn't seem to be as good as he thought. Heroes and villains, real villains, just kept finding him. Didn't matter what he was doing, they'd find him. At first, he thought he might be famous, but he had only ever seen one vigilante talked about on the news, and he died. There was no way to know if he was famous among heroes, but surely not among villains. Why would they even know about him? See, he's got that sheet. Mao was positively ecstatic when he learned Kurogiri had fought. Senpiter, that couldn't be his name, that was already taken, and the dumbest thing Kurogiri had heard since the last time he paid attention to Mao. I do admit, he is talented, more intelligent than you, and quick on his feet. He assessed my quirk and predicted where I'd teleport to after seeing it only once. He also accurately guessed my lack of combat experience. Kurogiri summarized the events for his master. Praise from contingent number 2 and contingent number 5. How unexpected. My 2 hardest to please contingents, and someone meets both your requirements. Kurogiri bowed while Mao laughed, nodding. Don't know if da guy wanna run in your sheet, but he great at fightin'. Mao had never found somebody with the same drive, the same hunger as Midoriya. Every fight could turn into a death match against him because he fought like he had nothing to lose. I agree, whether or not he will join us is in the air, especially since he is a vigilante. I say he's a much better choice than, Stain. Kurogiri still hated the very concept of working with that fool, but as it was, Shigaraki was looking for subordinates and Stain was on his list. He could already see how that would go even if Shigaraki couldn't. He's more likely to not get in our way, and from the immediate reports it seems he has fought Maruko, but the police and heroes don't realize he's the same person who defeated Mao. A real nameless hero, with no name to pin his works on. His mere existence makes the heroes look worse if only more people knew of him. Has he tried saving anyone yet? Kurogiri shook his head. Not that we know of. Course not, he's still training in Tilda. Mao interrupted Kurogiri and kept on talking. Ya saw dat arm, but ya see dat tree. He was practicing. Mao did the most math he'd done since 4th grade. I be thinking I might have been his first real fight. I did some askin', nobody nowhere knew nothing back about him. Dat means he's been a hero for what, a month? 2, tops. Kurogiri must be honest, he didn't know Mao could count. This level of forethought showed how interested he was in the child, who clearly was under 18. His injuries are from rookie mistakes then, and the reason he hasn't done much is he spends most of his time recovering from injuries. Understandable. Right now, he does not seem physically fit to come here. We shall wait and monitor him, find out more. Then, and only then, will we make a decision. Master's words were final, but Kurogiri didn't expect Mao to agree too. No fun fighting that slippery Sendipider if he ain't in top form. Otherwise I be playin' tag. And I'm sheet at tag. Mao laughed, rising. Now, I gotta train and sheet. Gotta get Ma best condition. The second that Sendipider in top condition. Hey. Midoriya stretched his arm. 2nd month of healing, and he returned to school last month. He wore the sling for safety's sake, but still cranked through homework. The sling looked like it was just for pity, but nobody noticed the knife lying on the inside, just in case someone showed up at school. He had learned knife fighting because it was one-handed. It was very similar to sword fighting with only thrusts, or a one-handed spear. The primary attack was to stab, not to slash. A proper step-in provided most of the reach, with the arm snaking out from the shoulder to get the speed. He held the knife like he held the spear, letting it slope forward like he was pointing at something with it. A slightly relaxed grip to avoid tensing the muscles, which would slow him down. Now he'd been cranking out the knife fighting and pushing front kick. The front kick would push them away, and if that didn't work, shank them. Keeping it simple, because everything complicated brought heroes and villains like a super weapon convention. He packed up his things and left, rolling his shoulder. It was almost done healing, maybe another week or two and he'd need a new place to store it. Before then, he had something else he wanted to do. A ranged attack that was weaker than a gun, but much quieter and less likely to kill, something he wanted to avoid. Right now, at least, he was starting to think if he capped some of these idiots they'd stop popping up everywhere. He'd seen it on his way home on Friday but didn't have his money on him. This time he went in and purchased the items, darts and a dartboard. He greeted his mom and set it up in his room, looking up a few videos and practicing. He set it inside his closet so the scratches and misses were harder to spot. Then, he began to drill dart after dart at the board. It took 16 videos and an hour to regularly hit the board. This was his left hand, he wasn't expecting much better. Still, after hitting the board once, he kept on drilling. A couple of thousand throws later, he could regularly hit the targets instead of the numbers. Not bad improvement for one day. He could hit within about a foot of where he aimed with his left arm, throwing from across the room. He went into meditation, breathing calmly as he focused. It had been over 3 months since he aimed to be a vigilante. 7 months till the UA entrance exam, and Bakugo would shut the fuck up about it. Midoriya kept on throwing till he managed to stick all the darts into the target before coming across a good thought he seemed to have skipped over. What was All Might doing in Japan? He's an American hero, how had he skipped over that point so many times? He was so disappointed by their meeting he never tried to figure out how it happened. Was it just a team up? With his physical condition? Unlikely. Quote. Whatever, if he moves here, it's just one more fake to look out for. Midoriya yawned and went to bed. Tomorrow was Tuesday, and he had shit to do. So we believe Mao will now be looking for the vigilante who beat him. Nezu finished, standing atop a stack of books, which was itself on a chair slowly spinning him to face the corner rather than his audience. Any questions? Present Mike scratched the side of his head. Yeah, just a couple. Anybody know why he was shouting about Centipeter? I didn't know they ever met. Aizawa, who'd been stuck researching the idiot, shook his head. Never even heard of each other from our intel. Centipeter himself also backs this up. Does that mean the person who beat him looks like Centipeter? Maybe they have a worm for a head or so Methingu. It was rude, but Midnight couldn't help shivering at the thought. Someone made entirely of worms. Gross. Nezu nodded. It seems to be a reference to the unnamed vigilante, but it doesn't tell us much about anything. Mao's so dumb, he thinks All Might is Maruko because he knows Maruko is the rabbit hero and look at All Might's hair. Present Mike snickered at All Might, who shook his head. He doesn't even know that. He's so dumb, it's like he speaks his own language. Still, any reports on vigilante activity while we're all here Eraserhead? Midnight. Nezu was oddly interested in this for some reason. Midnight pulled out the papers she had written over 3 months. She was a fourth of the way done. Just focus on the end. Midnight, eyes on the prize. That's sweet, sweet pay bonus. Vigilante activity has been subdued for the last 2 months and declining. 3 months ago was the little Musudafu beheading incident, then a month later was the chiller collapse. Not even a week later, a vigilante broke Maruko's ankle though she refuses to disclose anything more than that, and she appears to be looking for him independently. She's made a full recovery in 2 days. Other than that, nothing much. The vigilante who beat the chillers and the one who beat Maruko have been confirmed by Maruko to be the same person. The other vigilante activities usually collapse on their own or do very little, Aizawa put in his 2 cents. Since Midnight was stuck on this, there have only been 3 major vigilante activities and she covered all 3. Is it possible, Nezu asked, his chair now completely facing the corner and continuing on with him making no effort to turn and face his audience, that all 3 incidents are the same person? We can't disprove it, we just can't prove it. Aizawa adjusted his notes. Different costume, weapon of choice, and fighting style. The only thing the same is how thorough both were. Snipe put in his 2 cents. It's pretty smart if you think about it. By constantly shifting his style, it becomes impossible to put a search out for him. If even the fighting style is different, who's to say he hasn't moved away already? He could be in China, or America, or anywhere. As far as the authorities know, he's just some random one-off vigilante. He comes, does his thing, and leaves. By the time you think to look for foreigners instead of local vigilantes, he's been gone for months. Aizawa nodded. He could even still be here, purposely doing easier jobs to throw us off his scent. As long as we don't learn anything about him, he can be anything he wants. No quirk, no age, no height, the gender is a guess and I had sand in my eyes at the time. All the witnesses are scared shitless by him. I'd call him a ghost, but we already have a vigilante with that name. Nezu laughed. I'm glad you realize how much of an anomaly this vigilante is. Every report on him assigns him a different name, making it extremely difficult to figure out who the reports are even about. It seems we've been defeated by our own system. So, are we going to assign him a name? Vlad asked. Nobody was really sure how to deal with this. Most vigilantes made their own names, and it showed with how cringy they could be. Who got to pick the name? The cops, the heroes. Does it matter what we call him so long as we know it's him? I prefer the name Super Vigilante. Hey, and he beat all of us did. Nezu started laughing over the whole super name thing again. The meeting wound down, with each of the teachers talking about their curriculum. No one really cared about some vigilante, they'd each seen hundreds. Some had been vigilantes at one point in their life. None of them, except for the crazy principal, had any idea just how earth-shattering that vigilante would be. Chapter end notes. You thought Midoriya would ever get a clean win? Bullshit. We introduced the final big players. I'll admit, I forced Nezu. If Nezu didn't meet Midoriya, he'd probably have much less interest. However, All For One was destined to meet him eventually due to the time period. Midoriya aims for gangs that would be under All For One's influence, and All For One's information network is good enough to find Midoriya. Nezu and the rest of UA would find out about him eventually, but I chose to speed up awareness to force Midoriya to choose a name. More about that at the end. More about Mao was discovered, so to answer some questions that you might have. Does Mao have multiple quirks? Yes, he originally had 5. He kept forgetting about them, so he now has 3. All of his current quirks work automatically without him needing to do anything, so he can't forget to use them like the original 4 he was given. Is Mao part of the League of Villains? No, Mao is like Gigantomagia, a backup plan. Mao's quirk makes him possibly able to kill All Might, so he was a method prepared in case he was necessary. If Mao was in the canon, he would have been forgotten as he wouldn't have been helpful to All For One for anything else and he doesn't work for the League of Villains. Can Mao kill All Might? Possibly. It was briefly monologued about, but Mao gets increasingly stronger the longer he fights since fighting makes him excited. However, it takes longer to get higher benefits because he gets less and less excited from the same fight. Midoriya's fights, for example, excite him a lot more than normal, so he's able to skip stages. Mao has 4 stages listed, each one denoted by him becoming immune to something. They're not hard transformations, but more like markers alongside the road. Anytime he's immune to normal attacks, he's in stage 1, whether he just entered and it no longer hurts to almost at stage 2 and he can't feel normal attacks anymore. Can Mao kill All Might? Can't. There is no real upper limit on his powers that has been discovered by the people testing him, meaning if he built up enough excitement possibly. It's why he's a backup, it's not known if he could actually win. Technically, he could crack a planet with his quirk, he'd just need literal years of hype building which is almost certainly impossible. Also, if he has physical damage that would kill him but doesn't affect his current stage, he needs to get it healed before his excitement wears off or he'll die. It's mentioned some things that have nearly killed him in the past have been exhaustion from lack of sleep, starvation and dehydration and suffocation. What are Mao's other quirks? Not saying for now, and Mao forgot what they were. Oops. Other things, knife fighting and he's not even done with spear fighting. I like changes that are caused by necessity, it makes things feel more alive than just following the plan no matter what. Midoriya has learned the pushing front kick, but we didn't really say anything about it. This is not the groin front kick, unfortunately. All in due time. Getting laughed off by the heroes. You have to wonder how many vigilantes they see every day, and how they separate the important ones from the small fries. They might get a few mixed up, even ones with major accomplishments. I look forward to them realizing their mistake. Finally, the importance of having no name. Nobody brings it up, but having no name and being a vigilante is amazing. Reports are harder to write, it creates confusion in the enemy, and tracking you becomes a mess when they don't know which nameless person did it. It basically creates its own alibi. Still, Midoriya is going to get named soon. Don't worry, I didn't just call this fanfic Ronin cause it sounds cool. I called this fanfic Ronin cause it sounds really cool to a weeb like me who likes Japanese references. Chapter 22. Chapter 22. Chapter summary. Midoriya had hurt his arm fighting Maruko and has almost finished recovering. Only 7 months until UA exams, or regular school exams for our protagonist. Midoriya bought a dartboard and has been practicing. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. The knife hit with a thunk, a little to the left of where Midoriya had been aiming. He threw the last 2, missing the board entirely and hitting the cardboard backboard he put up. Midoriya gathered the 4 knives, checking the target. It wasn't made for the knives, but it was holding together pretty well. He was improving at least, he could usually hit within 3 inches of his target with the darts and miss by a mile with the knives. He flipped the knife, catching it by the blade. His right arm was basically done healing, but he was going to start using it more tomorrow. He could try juggling, and he had to learn all the knife tricks with his other arm. His right arm had a lot of catching up to do. Still, he kept drilling with his left. If he was using the kanabo, his left hand wouldn't be doing anything and could throw stuff like knives or ninja stars. Midoriya planned to go start forging some throwing weapons tomorrow, so today he'd research throwing weapons. Another flick of the wrist, another throw of the knives. These knives weren't meant for throwing, so it was amazing he was hitting anything. He had just stolen these during fights, all from random goons who had some good stuff. Mostly guns, which he added to the pile in the forest. The fewer guns on the streets were better. More throws as he turned on videos, looking up something easy to make. He stopped on an old video, 46 years old, all about ninjas and their throwing weapons. There was one so easy he couldn't pass it up, and it couldn't believe it was real. He dropped the knives and got to drawing, hoping this was real and he was getting bullshitted. If this was real, he could have 100 throwing weapons by this time tomorrow. School was long and painful with the dipshit classmates. They still tried to start shit, especially now that he couldn't defend himself. He just let it slide, not giving enough of a shit to stop them. Bakugo just ignored him like he didn't exist. It was a mutual relationship, at least. He didn't get any help even with his arm, so his left hand had to get good at writing. He had to admit, it was looking much better than when he started. 2 months of writing was really paying off, and his own notes could now be written in either one. It still wasn't good, but it was legible. Still, he didn't care. He waited patiently for the bell to ring and left, grabbing a whole bunch of metal strips he had bought yesterday and ditching his school supplies as he grabbed a bag filled with metal strips and his vigilante kit, or what was his vigilante kit. Yesterday he had sent his jacket to some shitty dry cleaners he was sure the pro heroes wouldn't find because the other vigilantes used it. The vigilantes were too dumb to find him even when he asked on their board for good dry cleaners and followed their advice. His helmet he had to buy cleaning supplies before he wore that thing for the smell alone. It was like hell inside there. Instead, he had the 3 bulletproof vests, prime and ready for modification. He was a little nervous about going back to where the smoky guy had followed him to, but he hadn't led him to the same office he hid inside. Just one nearby, since he had started to look inside other buildings. Still, he couldn't avoid the area forever. He entered his familiar turf, locking everything as much as he could on the first floor while leaving an escape route for himself. He pulled out the propane tank, stolen from Chiller's warehouse, and got to work making his new weapon, seemingly unaware that he almost always got into fights shortly after making a new weapon and costume. First, he was going to start modifying the area. He finally bought a clamp and was going to attach it to the counter he usually forged at. He drilled 4 holes into the counter, then put the screws in to secure it. Next up, making the weapon form. He took his handsaw and clamped the metal strip into it, measuring it out and partially sawing through. When he was halfway done, he flipped it and finished sawing it. The finished metal pieces were thin, 6-inch long rectangles. Midoriya then hammered and sharpened the ends like needles, flattening them until the tips were thin and sharp. Midoriya tested the balance, then did another. He had 15 experiments before he decided on the form he wanted to use as a base. He kept this one on hand for comparison as he worked, quickly replicating the design. These needles were the bow shuriken, and basically just throwing needles. A set of bow shuriken. He cranked them out easily. It barely took 5 minutes for one and after a couple of hours even less. He ended up with 60 of the things before he called it a day on the needles. He could make more tomorrow. For now, where he'd store them, he began to work on the bulletproof vests, aiming to turn it from vests into a sort of shorts. He was going to strap it around his thighs, his first and second belt to keep it at his hips. The second set of belts kept the bottom wrapped around above his knees. The vests were so large they wrapped around his legs a few times and blocked the cargo pants pockets. He'd have to both add some new ones and change his choice of pants during heroism. Starting with his current idea, all the body armor had pockets meant for ammo clips. Instead, he modified them to hold his new shuriken. Sewing them to tightly fit his new throwing weapons, then adding a velcro latch over top to keep them in place. He was getting kinda good at this sewing thing, and he even remembered to back up his sewing with hot glue. He wore the full ensemble, doing a few practice steps. He'd taken off the sling to put the vests on and practice moving around. Then he busted out his favorite target, spending a few hours cranking out needles into the target. He admittedly favored his left side, but wasn't it good to give both his arms something to do? Midoriya stepped out and quickly made his way back to the sewers, still in costume. He learned from Maruko, fuck being subtle and just book it. He practically dove for the sewer cap until he heard voices in his favorite alleyway. God, maybe he should just buy that luck charm. There was a couple of guys surrounding a woman. Seriously, where were all the criminals who were girls? Did they prefer a richer area? Oh, who gives a fuck? This was something he signed up for. First, time to find a mask. Just close your eyes, bitch, you'll be on your way in under 10. The 3 guys laughed at her clear feel as one pushed her against the wall, one grabbing her pants and giving a sharp pull down. Her squirming just seemed to make it better for them. They were laughing, and the 4 laughing voices cut through the air. One guy kept pinning her while the pants guy started working on the shirt, the third guy doing the math and noticing something was wrong. Who was laughing, and why were they coming from above them? He looked up right as a backpack fell on his head, followed by 2 strange needles that got him in the stomach. He spat blood as the thing above him laughed again. It was hunched like a gargoyle, with very large thighs and a small upper body. The other 2 noticed the thing above them, still laughing loudly. The first guy, spotter guy, pulled the needles from his stomach, some sort of projectile quirk. It hurt to move, it hurt to just breathe. The stripper man stepped back, going for his gun and instead getting another needle to the arm, then 2 more to the body as compensation. It wasn't lethal, but it hurt like a bitch. The thing finally reached the alleyway, still laughing. Its head was wrapped in a white cloth, the whole face covered. It kept its right arm in a pocket, laughing as more needles appeared in its hand. Somebody had spent way too long trying to throw 2 at the same time and was anxious for some live practice. The thing walked towards them, its left a blur as more and more needles pierced the 3 men who tried to fight back. Through the whole walk, it kept on laughing until one of them switched arms and managed to fire a shot, hitting it in the chest. It was pushed back for a moment. Its head wrap was shifted, and you could see the mouth now. When shot, it was a neutral surprise. Then, a small smile, a giggle, it began to advance faster, drawing its right and a Bowie knife. It was serious now. It dashed forward, laughing as the knife danced around them. Small quick stabs from the large knife in its great reach, aided by throwing more of those needles. One fell, his limbs pierced too many times to keep him standing. The next took a pommel to the dome and collapsing. It stopped over him, doing something. The last man, the stripper man, was extremely nervous as you could hear a wet squishing sound. The girl was frozen on the spot, way more scared than when she was nearly raped. She might have been raped, but she was at least pretty sure she'd survive. It stood up, still chuckling. Its whole upper body twisted as it switched the knife to its other arm, throwing the knife with his left. It spun head over handle before the pommel slammed into the gut, forcing him to breathe out. Bowie knives weren't meant to be thrown, but when they hit they felt like a fully loaded punch. He fell to his knees as something approached, laughing again. God, I'm sorry, forgive me, Forgy. He got a face full of foot as it walked past him, then spun and side kicked his head into the wall. It stood above the 3, then went back to the still conscious man who was bleeding out, choking him out so he couldn't resist. This had all taken less than a minute. Quick and fast. It was doing something to the man, then turned to look at her. The victim in all this pressed her back against the wall, breathing shallow. Ha ha he, you alive back there, ha ha he. She nodded her head, then ran away, finally screaming as she hit the street. He looked out, shaking his head. Midoriya felt sort of like it was back to his old days. He wasn't feeling up to it, so he came from above. Then he realized he didn't have any of his big one-hit weapons, and they had guns. He had to close the distance. He didn't want his voice to be recognizable, so he tried to cough. The tension made his voice sound really high since there were lives on the line right now. He just started laughing when he realized how fucked he was. If he missed them for 1 second, he could end up iced. Again, been a while since he felt that. When one switched arms, he had stopped reserving his right arm and drew his self-defense knife, not meant for throwing. He'd actually meant to hit the guy in the forehead, but it was so heavy it went underneath its target. At least it didn't stab his throat. He grabbed the guns, maybe stole some loose change, who's to know, and called the police before disappearing into the sewers. And thus, the third vigilante persona of Izuku Midoriya was born, with Midoriya largely unaware that he even had one yet. He was planning to make his debut in high school when he'd have the free time from online classes to deal with this shit. There's another Untilda. Nezu was so happy as both Midnight and Eraserhead face-planted into their desks. Is this one similar to any of the ones on record? Midnight sounded hopeful, her makeup long left barely done and smeared from face-planting. Nope, this one seems like a psychopath. Put a bunch of holes in his victims and was laughing the whole time. Nezu couldn't resist laughing himself. So they're related to you? Aizawa groaned and copied the report to his computer. His eyes flicked down the screen, and he face-planted again. This one seems more like a villain than a vigilante whose victims just happen to be bad people. Armed with a Bowie knife, stabbing them. They were more playing with them than fighting. Least he bandaged them up before the cops arrived. Midnight countered and refilled her coffee before drowning it in sugar. Looks like they might have bled to death without some medical care. That could have been some other vigilante. Aizawa countered her counter. Remember Doctor, I still see him sometimes. He says he's a vigilante, but all he actually does is follow other vigilantes and patch them and their victims up before anyone dies. In that time frame, Midnight countered his countering. He'd have to be following him already, and all 4 witnesses testify there was only one perp. First witness, the original victim, had already run to the police station. This guy only had 5 minutes before they show up, and I don't think your doc would find them in that time no matter how good he is. Aizawa nodded, glad she was finally getting good at these debates. This case was from 3 days ago, but the police had only recently handed it over when the facts were all straight. It was good, since there was no misinformation, but bad because it took so long. Still, it also kept the easy ones that took 10 minutes to solve out of their hands. Still, none of the weapons. These testimonies make it sound like he's making 10 of these every second, but no weapons were found on the scene. Even their own weapons were stolen. Vigilantes are usually on a budget, and guns are pretty expensive. We'll keep an eye out for the guns on the black market, but they're unmarked so it'll be hard to track them. There are probably already 100 of the same model out there. Aizawa pulled out his trusty eyedropper. If we're coming up with a code name, I'll pin this one with Psychopath. Psychopath, the Sendipiter himself, sneezed. He rubbed his nose and looked around again, then shook off the strange feeling. He was going to go to a gym, damn it, he was finally healthy. He only needed to be for about a month or 2 to get down all the moves he wanted and then he could ditch this place. He had skipped the one where he met the small guy getting mugged. That place was shady as hell. After crossing off any large ones, he had 2 options. One cost 2,000 yen less, so it was the winner, no contest. He went in, turning in all the papers. He and his mom had come here Sunday, but he wanted to spend his recovery time making 500 needles to fill out all his pockets. He also took the charged pants off his cargo pants and attached them to his weird bulletproof shorts. Truly, those bulletproof shorts were gonna shake the world. The front person smiled, told him all about things and he politely played along before going to the open area, flipping open his notes. Interacting with people was taking away from his time working, and when you were as god-awful as a god-awful quirkless gim, you needed all the advantages you could get. He went straight into stretches. He could finally do that lotus pose with minimal discomfort. He held it for a minute before springing up and doing some wall stretches. He pushed against the wall, pressing his heel into the ground as his body sloped forward, forming a right triangle. The gym, or the section he cared about, was large and mostly open. Boring white walls, and lots of strange shapes along the floor. Boxes stacked on boxes, the size of cars. Slopes and triangles. Bars for climbing connected some boxes. The floor was padded, as were most of the structure. It was great, nobody gave a shit about him here. So long as no one found he was a cripple, it'd stay that way. Midoriya practiced by stepping back from the wall, planting his hands on the floor, and jumping off the floor to get his feet off the floor. They didn't even get all the way above him before they fell back down. The second try was a lot closer but still too short. The third was the classic overshoot, and his legs hit the wall. Another kickoff and he fell over again. Fifth-ish try and they stayed above his head for 2 whole-ish seconds before falling again. He just practiced this over and over with no risk of conking himself on the head. 20 minutes later, he could keep his feet in the air for about a minute. He grabbed some water and decided to break up his meditation for a minute or 3. It actually ended up being 2 when someone poked him in the face. Are you asleep? He opened one eye, looking at a small child with black hair. Quote. Yes. The child blinked at him. Can I sleep too? He blinked back, then closed his eye again. Quote. Sure. The child first lay down, then eventually tried to sit like him. Midoriya didn't bother giving him any tips, just kept an eye on him for when his parents inevitably came and took him. They did, and he just smiled and waved goodbye to his sleeping buddy. Next up was front flips. He practiced, again and again, managing quite a few front rolls before he realized he might need an actual person for this. Still, he didn't want to pay any extra for help. Instead, he ripped off his favorite teachers, heroes. Sure enough, he could find some video clips of them doing flips. He practiced a couple of times, trying to get the distance to plant his legs right before sort of sticking one, still winding up on his ass but looked marginally more professional while he did it. 10 minutes of attempting the front flip later and he had managed to stick it twice. Another water break and a quick 1-minute meditation before getting back into the grind. It was over an hour before he could consistently pull it off. Still, he'd need to come back to practice it more and ingrain these skills. Otherwise, he'd just forget. Still, today was Friday. His mom knew he'd be out late drilling, and this place was open till 10 on the weekend, those poor workers. More reps and he tried stringing them together. Only took 10 minutes to get his first double, and the progress from there was much easier. 30 minutes later, he could get the occasional triple before face planting. The crowd had shifted from the ones he saw when he came in. The next day and he was back to flipping. It took a bit to get into his rhythm from the previous day, but he finally got it down. Next up was a cartwheel. First time he did that one, he did spin. Straight onto his face. Midoriya laughed it off and kept on trucking. An hour passed, and he could sort of do it in both directions. His right side was still a little weaker than his left, but practice would work that out. He then got down into vaults, the art of going around obstacles in parkour. From climbing to flipping over obstacles, these were very important. Midoriya sought to get them down as quickly as possible, so he only was going for 3 basics at first. An hour on each, even if he thought he was done at 30 minutes. First was the safety vault. It was, believe it or not, a very safe vault. You ran at the ledge, put your hands on it as you jumped, and put one foot on the thing you were climbing. Then you just pulled yourself up and over. Nice, safe, and easy. For large things to climb, you could put a foot on the wall you were vaulting over to push yourself up further. Second on his menu was a very similar one, the wall vault, wall run, or wall climb. You put your hands on the wall and jumped up, putting one foot on the wall to push yourself higher. This was the same thing used to get the extra height for the safety vault. Third up was a turn vault. It was used when you were on a ledge. You twisted around as you jumped over the ledge so you were facing the ledge on the side you wanted to drop down. You could brace your legs on the wall to rest, then safely drop quickly. Midoriya worked on them, combined them, thought about it, and threw in a fourth jump, the precision jump. It could be defined as the long jump motion, but at a specific spot. You put your feet together, swung your arms, and tried to stick the landing with both feet for balance before breaking them apart to move. These 4, plus his rolling, was a good enough base for now. He kept on drilling them until he started to put them together for fun. By running along the wall towards a ledge and pushing off the wall before you jump to the ledge, you could get some really good height. He could get some good flips in the middle of his jumps for good practice. At 2, he left for lunch. Just something light as he kept practicing his movement in the streets, climbing and jumping as much as he could. His core was getting pretty solid, and if he kept up the practice he'd be pretty good at this. Back at the grind again, with regular breaks for meditation. He still stretched when he came into the gym, even though he already had. Midoriya's body could seize up in record time, becoming taut and unrelated at the drop of a hat. It was probably around 4 when someone sat down next to him as he was practicing his headstand. His time had gotten up to 1 minute since he wasn't so tired, but the distraction made him fall over at 25 seconds. Same kid as yesterday, he didn't seem too happy, but was content just to chill with the sleepy guy. Whatever, Midoriya liked the quiet too. They just chilled for a couple of minutes, staring at the ceiling. The same lady as before with brown hair came, picked him up. They nodded goodbye to each other. Midoriya went back to the grind again with gusto, his extended nap providing extra energy as he moved around the gym. It entered a lull of people, and for the young man trying to avoid human contact like it was 2020, it was great. He ran up walls, flipped off everything, and was generally having the time of his life. Plus, tomorrow was his favorite, golf day. He the road at 7, trying and failing to whistle but not really caring. Sunday went great, and Midoriya managed to get a hole in 20 shots. What was worse was that it was undeniable that this was improved from his first time. They went to the beach this time, marveling as they passed the dump that was looking mildly better for some reason. Looks like someone decided to do something about it. Still, they enjoyed the view and ate lunch there before returning home and watching more television. The routine was comforting, as was his mom's appearance. Since he was helping to make meals, he got a say in how much they made. Her eating habits were getting curbed, as were his. She usually ate too much while he ate too little, but now they were starting to even out. Midoriya reflected briefly on the day as he was sitting in his room, meditating. 2 more weeks at the gym. That should be enough for him to get everything he needed. Then he'd bail, dig up his old mask in the first piece of shit he made, and get down to it. He'd make a real katana and name for the vigilante he was going to become. Chapter and notes. Images from 2 chapters in 1 day. Dare we dream, could we get 3? I'm trying man, I really am. My typing is either getting longer or I'm getting slower. Probably because I'm starting to do this weird thing where I think ahead. I think it's called forethoughts. From the top, Midoriya is using a new weapon. The throwing needle, bow shuriken. Basically what history means when people talk about throwing kunai. These are the generic throwing weapons for sticking into someone. They're almost impossible to kill with but really good at inflicting minor pain. Midoriya right now has 4 weapons on him in costume: kanabo, quarterstaff, knife, and shuriken 5 if you count his martial arts, and he's going to get his original weapon to complete the set, a katana. Midoriya also sets when he will pick a name for himself, so you guys in the comments can stop wondering when Ronin will get name dropped. We're going Iron Man 1 here, we're waiting till the end to pull that off. Except that's not the end, I just be playin'. Midoriya's third persona. This one does have a nickname, but that's more like a local name to refer to it as. Think of it as an inside joke almost, since anyone other than the heroes at UA wouldn't know who they're talking about but the ones inside would. It doesn't solve the problem that reports are confusing, it creates the problem since each department refers to the person by their own name for the person. All of Midoriya's personas have a nickname that causes this. First one, Little Musudafu Beheading, Mao Killer, Ninja Guy. Second one, Chiller Roundup and Maruko Oni, Sewer Gator. Third one, this chapter, Psychopath Clown Incident, Psychopath Clown. Nezu making Midnight and Aizawa cry. I like the counter joke, a joke from my Hajime no Ippo days and Andy Dempsey roles. Still, I like us knowing what the heroes are doing while all this is going on. I don't like it when there's one cutaway and suddenly everything's changed. Midoriya finally went to the gym. The writer, got around to it. Midoriya is not going to a normal gym but one that has a specific area for parkour. Usually, everything is padded and there are a bunch of random objects to vault off of and over. Lastly, some questions. When is Midoriya getting named as a vigilante? When he's finished making major changes to his costume. He still has a few improvements to make, and people will keep thinking he's a different person until he steps up completed. Is Midoriya done making weapons? Nope, I said earlier that Midoriya will get Eastern swords eventually, and while I might be a backstabbing two-tongued snake, I'm not a liar. Also, he still has a spear to make, and maybe a few other things. There is a real-world person who inspired this version of Midoriya, and no one mentioned him but the influence isn't very clear yet. There are also 2 video game characters. I'll leave you to guess who those 3 are. Will there ever be a picture of what Midoriya looks like? Maybe, if it's made by me it will either be a bunch of images and the text saying, use your brain and imagine it, or a crappy pencil sketch with no color. Maybe both, who knows? Ain't that some fun options? Remember, if you jump off a building above 3 stories and land on your chin you get superpowers. Chapter 23. Chapter 23. Chapter summary. Midoriya finally got around to going to the gym. He set a day to create his sword and a name for himself, by the time he entered high school at the latest. It's only 6 months away. Chapter notes. Keep fixing this bozo. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Midoriya vaulted over a piece of colorful foam, jumping over the barrier while pulling in his legs. A second later the sleepy child moved after him, grabbing the barrier with both hands and jumping halfway up before rolling over the rest of the barrier, falling on the ground for just a second before jumping back to his feet and getting back to running. Another vault over the colorful foam. The sleepy child was mimicking him, both bouncing over the colorful hurdle. They had been getting pretty close, with Midoriya dragging out this gym membership longer than he thought he would just to see the kid. It was nice. It reminded Midoriya of what he was trying to do. The kid seemed a little sensitive about heroes, but he liked playing and running as much as the next kid. Eventually, the kid's guardian came and took him away. The kid waved goodbye, while Midoriya only nodded farewell awkwardly, then got straight back to practice. He vaulted over the small barrier he'd been playing it with the kid, ran up the wall slightly, and pushed off towards his final destination, a foam well meant to be climbed up to. His fingers wrapped around the edge as he pushed a foot into the foam and performed a safety vault up. Sitting up there, he looked at his hands, contemplating how his work was going. His shoulder was healed, his research was nearly done, and he'd really honed his spearmanship, along with his knifemanship. There weren't really any formal teachings for the kanabo, but his control of the unruly weapon was getting slightly better, aka he could break arms in one hit from the thing. And if that wasn't control, what was? Another stitch in the cloth. Midoriya squinted at his jacket, admiring the tons of spots he attached for holding weapons. Knives, shuriken, his quarterstaff components, and his kanabo pieces. They had been sealed with hot glue and were looking pretty solid. His bulletproof shorts were now more secure than ever, attaching to the main belt for his pants, and a strap for each leg. They wrapped around loosely but stayed close to his legs so he could move easily without it getting in the way. There were now pockets, truly the greatest innovation of all. His shin guards had been replaced by ones much too large over top a set of backward leg guards, his old broken ones, all of which was over a layer of cushion to protect from impacts. The double layer kept his legs and ankles safe from anyone who fought with even half as many dick move tactics. His shoes had been refitted and had some parts ripped off from the kickboxing design. Wasn't as good as the real thing, but with enough layers of padding, cloth, and glue it was good enough. His toes couldn't be stomped on, due to the steel toes he'd ripped off from some thrift store boots. His arms, he hadn't found anything better. The less said about that the better. Finally, his pride and joy, the anti-everything vest. Waterproof cloth on the inside and cushion to help deal with the knockback of getting shot. It was resistant to blunt impacts and stabbing from the hundreds of metal needles serving as armor plating. A bullet would have to get through the jacket, the needles, the vest, and the padding to hit him. For most vests, being shot would still leave a bruise. Midoriya was pretty confident in this version at least. As a last note, Midoriya's mask. He thought about trying to install the old breather, but he didn't have the skill to cut away parts of the motorcycle helmet and keep the structure intact. Instead, he got a one-way visor and neck protection. It got hot if it was above 27 Celsius 80 degrees-ish he'd be fine. Midoriya practiced switching between his weapons for about 10 minutes a week and practiced throwing things every day. His left hand was still better even after 5 months of practice, but both could throw the needles with reasonable accuracy. When it came to knives though, left hand all the way. 3 months to the start of the UA exams, maybe he could watch or something. They were supposed to be private, but so were most of the places he went with this jacket on. He'd make it work. But before that, his research, the money he saved, it was all for this moment, the creation of his second sword. Midoriya had waited calmly, persevering. His classmates had back off at his strange focus, his eyes seeming to always be looking past them now. It was like he was a mastermind, constantly working on his next plan. Get that fucking look off your face, Deku, you quirkless gimp. Somebody's shoe clocked him across the mouth. His expression was still calm, but his eyes were closed. He turned his head back, wiping the blood off his mouth with his thumb. His eyes opened and looked downward, focusing on his finger before rising to tear Bakugo in half without even touching him. Quote. Sorry, Kachan, should I wear a mask? I got a great ski mask I might wear to school. He couldn't help the small smile as Bakugo broke the stare down. His eyes, the burning desire in them crushed other people. Mao had done something to him on their first meeting, changed him. This world didn't seem so scary anymore. It seemed petty and weak, rude and cruel. He wanted to break it. The fake heroes, the stuck-up civilians, and pitiful villains. Midoriya didn't hate any of them personally, he just wanted to tear down the system. He was pretty sure that made him a villain. He licked his lips, putting together the act he had planned for these months. His smile became a little bigger as everyone flinched back from him. He never hit back, never spoke with anything vulgar, but was always watching. Planning. He walked from school, still the epitome of calm. That was, until, he heard a strange sound. The rush of wind, but coming from an alley ahead of him. Midoriya switched to the other side of the road and barely spared a glance at what was in the alleyway he would have passed. There stood a confused smoky man. He waved hello like a cheery neighbor and dialed something on his phone, maintaining eye contact. Hey mom, I won't be coming home today, I got some plans with my friends. Don't worry, Kachan's a better guy than he looks. After all, it's impossible to be as bad as he looks. Talk to you later. Midoriya hung up, continuing to wear he kept his vigilante costume. He nodded and greeted the homeless people. He knew every one of their names and tried to share a brief word every time he saw them. Not today though, he was ending this business with the smoky man right here and now. He didn't even break pace as he went straight for the second-story room he kept his stuff in. Midoriya flipped over the window and threw his bag into the corner, ripping off his uniform and kicking off his shoes. The pants were close enough. Vest and shorts came on first, followed by his jacket. Everything after that was just useful. The shoes to protect his feet from dangerous footing, neck to keep his throat from being slit, and a mask to hide his identity. A pair of leg bracers per shin, and a set of arm guards. Mao finally entered the room as he had only one arm piece on. You kept me waiting, Mao. Simple and direct, he had to go straight forward now. I could barely contain myself, Senpaider. He licked his lips, much like the image Midoriya tried to set. But unlike Midoriya the faker, he was the real deal. He had put on more muscle and ditched shirts. They almost had a matching amount of scars, but the weird thing was 4 tattoos around where the bullet holes had been. 4 stars on his chest, almost showing off his nearly lethal injuries. We fight again, I won't be sparing you. You bring too much risk if kept alive. For now, he chose the weapon he was the most familiar with, the kanabo. It rested against his shoulder. It also opened his left hand for smaller attacks, like his needles. Good, how the hell do ya do that? Mao was clearly excited by the threat of death, not afraid. But for Mao, something about Senpaider when he spoke like that just twisted something in his mind, like when his benefactor spoke. There's a guy who wants to meet ya, he got the same talk. Same eyes, and right now neither of you even have eyes. I'm afraid I'm not interested, Mao. What you're trying to do is different from what I want to do. I'm just trying to harass small-time gangs, ya know. Their speech patterns were starting to match. Mao would sometimes mix English and his Japanese without stopping, and Midoriya, an ex-All Might fan, could keep up with him. It was a strange battle with no violence, just using tension as a weapon. Don't you want to know where I got my sheet? Mao's excitement was rising, and he wasn't even fighting. This was faster than Kurogiri thought was possible as he climbed in through the window. He couldn't teleport, the boy would notice. Don't care, I'm not interested in fashion. The boy meant every word of it, it was like looking at a younger master. The one who loathed society, and wanted to shatter it with his bare hands. You and I don't give a shit about ideals, so let's let violence do the talking. He adjusted his stance, letting his killing intent radiate out. He started to walk towards Mao, his left hand flickering and throwing a needle into Mao. It hit his skin but didn't do shit to the entranced man. He laughed, well aware he was entering stage 3. Quote. Ya know, I always had a weird thought. How would a guy like me kill All Might? It took both of them by surprise, with Senpaider real name Izuku Midoriya still walking forward. It was always hypothetical. I wondered how some quirkless gimp like me would do it. That explained his hatred. Mao was shocked out of his trance for a moment. Wait, you're quirkless Senpaider. Instead of responding, Midoriya stepped into the swing. Mao automatically adjusted the bare minimum distance to counter, but that was his mistake. Midoriya pulled it and turned it into a thrust. Mao moved forward, confident he could overpower the weak thrust. Right until the bat hit the needle from before, ramming it into him and sending him into critical condition. The way I decided on was to do something unexpected. He spun and tried to crush Kurogiri's skull. Kurogiri had to jump back out of the window to avoid, having been in such a trance he didn't react in time. He opened a portal behind himself to warp to safety right as the boy jumped out the window on top of him, knife in hand. Sorry, this isn't anything personal, I just need you to die. The scariest point wasn't how emotionless somebody could be, it was that he seemed actually sad. It meant he knew that, for himself to keep living the life he wanted, he had to remove them. And when the hesitation was gone, all the strife turned into a drive to go faster. They fell into the spot Kurogiri was the most familiar with both arms grabbing the child's arm. His left snaked out, shaking him with the same type of needle that was making Mao bleed out in some office no one would check. That was the scariest thing for Kurogiri. For all the things they did, all their experience and power, that was just another day. Him becoming a villain was certain, but did he side with his master, or would he take over after he shattered his master's empire? The world was turning as breathing became difficult, and everything froze. Stop. It was power, pure power. Midoriya kept on moving until forcibly restrained, however. When you were as outclassed as he was, it stopped mattering a while ago. What was the difference between a match and the sun to an ant? They both would kill it in an instant. Yet he'd been playing with matches, and spitting at the sun. He was like Mao, the difference in power was nothing anymore. For Midoriya, a man was sitting on a chair who felt very familiar. It was a little like looking into a mirror, but he hoped it was a funhouse mirror. Physically, they were nothing alike. The man in the chair had eyes long since scarred over, and a large body. His clothes were neat and tailored to him. He was relaxed and calm despite the near death of his companion. The familiar part was the aura, the killing intent, not directed at each other, but a constant willingness to kill. Either side wasn't going to hesitate if they had to come to blows. Kurogiri, get up. The man spoke more softly, flicking a hand toward Kurogiri. Something pressed down on him, holding the blood inside him like whatever was pinning Midoriya midair. He didn't have any way to counter this, but it couldn't last forever. Already, he was thinking of ways to try and disrupt it. You, my boy, are quite an interesting find. Here's what's going to happen, from what I know of you anyway. I will drop you. You try to finish Kurogiri off. I put a barrier between you two, and you rush me. When I put a barrier between us, you throw a knife at Kurogiri to finish him off, sealing yourself inside but possibly killing everyone who knows who you are. You will try to escape and alert the heroes because we already know who you are and you cannot deal with this yourself. How am I doing so far? Wrong. You're the bigger threat. My first attack is going to be at you. It didn't take a genius to look at who was bossing around who. This new person, sitting in a large chair like a king as he looked down on all of them, was most likely the biggest threat present. This was backed by the fact that the smoky man, who should be dying at the moment, was still alive. That guy is only alive because of your telekinesis quirk. The second you die, he'll start to bleed out. Whether he helps me or not once you're dead is optional. The big man was a little startled at Midoriya's honest reaction, but still laughed. He had thought Mao would at least last a minute against this boy, but Mao had nearly died before the boy the vigilante even finished his speech. Quite a good one too. They were going to get along swell, even if they didn't see eye to eye. It was the second thing they had in common. You're pretty honest. I'd hate to kill you. These quirks, paralyze and levitation, allow the target to keep their vitals going. It'd be a shame if his paralyzing quirk accidentally paralyzed the heart when he was recruiting. You're pretty honest. I'd hate to die. A man of culture. He nodded his head, slightly impressed. Kurogiri, go grab Mao. They seem to get along well enough. Then go get both of yourselves patched up. He sent him on his way with one of the 2 healing quirks he could use on others. Those were pretty rare these days. Kurogiri left as the man waved his hand, setting up a chair for the vigilante. This right now was the same treatment he would have given Shigaraki if that child was actually decent. But unlike that boy, who'd only be a threat to All Might if he got in the way of one of his punches while a real threat was trying to kill the number 1 fool and make him falter, this vigilante would find a way to put the blonde bunny down. Perhaps he already did, but they didn't know each other well enough to ask that. All things other than them were removed from the room. Midoriya was set down and could move again and, true to his word, the first thing he did was throw the bowie knife at the man's throat. It hit a wall of air, and Midoriya grabbed it like he knew it wouldn't work. Still, he went through with his word. I don't care about joining your organization. I don't need to be comforted, but if you showed up a little earlier I might have jumped for the opportunity. Midoriya could easily see the him of 6 months ago, just let down by All Might, siding with an organization like this. He still was a little detached from the bigot and would probably be a little happy if he kicked the bucket, but not enough to try and kill him himself. Honest till the end, a clear threat, but I think we can give you something you want. Power. The man was very confident in this. How? Actual weapons instead of the pieces of metallic and wooden shit he used right now. He could just make them later. Armor. It was true that most of what he was wearing came from this man indirectly, but could that really be called power? My quirk is very special, you see. As a show of good faith, I'll tell you my quirk, a secret not even most heroes know. He raised his right hand, creating first fire, then ice, then electricity, then all 3 at once. I can take and give other people quirks. I can take and give any quirk. Just say what power you want, and it's yours if you work for me. If we don't have it, we'll get it. Are you interested? Midoriya's mind was racing a mile a minute, but the man didn't seem to be worried. He knew all about Midoriya and probably had stalked him, knowing he was prone to these bursts of thought. He finalized his thoughts. Can you take quirks from dead people? A reasonable request, especially if the quirk he wanted was from someone dead. Midoriya had been analyzing quirks for years, and probably knew of some very good ones from heroes long since gone. To encourage him, he nodded. Yes, my quirk can be used on the dead. Midoriya stood up immediately and bowed to him, better than Mao ever had. Please give me 1 month. I will not tell anyone of you, but I need to prepare something. You can keep someone following me, but I need to prepare something for the quirk I want, and I can try and offer you something that I think you will like. Now that was a leap of faith. Midoriya might call the police, even if he didn't know who he was. His crimes were much greater than the vigilante's, and the vigilante might get his dream if he got him arrested. But the vigilante didn't know that. So what was his plan? Prepare for a month. Prepare what? Something to kill him. He could send someone to follow him, but Midoriya might outsmart most of them. The problem was most of his smarter subordinates were busy doing important things. There was one he could lend for a month, but if he wanted to follow this vigilante. Quote. Very well, but you will help the subordinate in his time with you. Are we at an understanding? Midoriya hadn't risen from his bow but gave a small nod. We are. Midoriya rose with a grace befitting his practice. Kurogiri, he warped in, bowing. You are going to watch over this vigilante to make sure he doesn't do anything that threatens me or my plans. Except for those that interfere with Shigaraki. He's a growing boy, and the experience could be useful for him. Help him if he asks, but don't do anything he doesn't bring up. Kurogiri agreed, still a little wary of the boy. He hadn't heard any of the conversations until his master used a quirk to call him, but they seemed to reach an agreement. But the boy was leaving, so he wasn't a subordinate. Midoriya told the man the location they'd be going to and stepped back out into his favorite abandoned office. The warp quirk was easy to study, it created a portal that had to be entered. The portal itself had to stay connected to the man's body, meaning all the portals were technically a part of him like hair. Why he didn't just teleport any attacks that would hit him straight through was beyond him. That was probably why the man picked him. This Kurogiri with a powerful quirk but no experience was the perfect match for the quirkless gimp who had nothing but experience. But, it gave him an idea or two. This was going to be easier than he thought. You know how to hide, don't you? He changed back into his uniform, then searching for the torn off buttons. They must have fallen off when he hurriedly tore off his middle school jacket. Yes, I can do that at least. Midoriya picked up the last of them, looking them over as he started on his way home. Can you fight? It was uncanny how cold his voice could sound. He was walking over where he drove a pin into Mao's heart without a flicker of remorse. Kurogiri wasn't sure he was ready for someone so cold. Even the most important kills would be done with no grandiose, just like a certain someone from the past. It was no wonder Master tried to get him on his side. Quote. No, not at the level you want. The boy shrugged, not bothered. You can learn. The boy didn't seem to care, unlike the child he usually watched. It was like their ages were swapped. We're going to my home, and I didn't promise you'd make it home alive. But you didn't either, and I have to sleep. Let's agree not to do anything to each other that's harmful, 1 month. After that, we can come to a new agreement. He was as much a businessman as his master. Kurogiri just nodded. The hide. I'll open the window so you can come inside, 5th floor 3rd from the right. He advanced, his cold disposition disappearing, replaced by a soft smile fitting the child he was supposed to be. Kurogiri broke off, watching him approach his apartment complex as people scorned him all the way. He teleported away, arriving at the forest he had first met the boy at, and soon saw a window open. He warped in, seeing a very, very hero-centric room. No one who saw this would assume this was a man who tried to throw a knife at the throat of the #1 villain in the world and nearly gutted 2 people with a somber expression. He was talking to his mother, an all-right parental figure. Not standout, but for her son, she was quite exemplary. Her husband, well, the less mentioned about that landmine, the better. Especially in front of the man who nearly killed Kurogiri with a throwing knife. You and I are going to go through tomorrow normally. I go to school, you keep an eye on me. But after school, the vigilante laughed, shedding his disguise of a schoolboy. Tomorrow we go hunting. Chapter and notes. Wowzer, I think this was the longest chapter. But I'm never sure. Big time skip to start this chapter off. Hope it still makes sense, but if it doesn't, this chapter ends with 2 months. It said 3 months earlier and that's wrong, my bad, until the UA entrance exam. I'm using that in the story as a sort of unit of measurement so we can tell where we are in the canon plot. Fast facts, this has some of the slowest startups I've ever seen in a fanfic. This was the beginning of us starting to zoom so we can get to the parts everyone wants, like actual vigilantism villainy, but that's for the end. Starting off, Midoriya's life it hasn't gotten much better, it's just Midoriya became so scary people stopped messing with him. Midoriya extended his membership to the gym and is still practicing there. Midoriya hasn't learned any new techniques but refined the ones he knows. The fight Midoriya started the fight with kill shots because if he kept them alive they would keep coming back and threatening him, especially since they know his civilian life and aren't likely to spare his family. Hope that makes sense why he's very okay murdering those two. Yes, for those wondering, Midoriya did beat Mao by using his needles like nails and stabbing him in the heart. Mao was at risk of dying because all sources of excitement immediately left, meaning he couldn't keep the hype up. The #1 villain and names I'm not sure it has come across, but I really like names and have a big thing for them. In the first chapter, Midoriya isn't name dropped once. Midoriya only starts coming up when he gains a sense of self, and thus gains a name. Izuku shows up briefly when he lowers his defenses with his mother, becoming more human and alive than he's been in years. The #1 villain and names can't. Ronin hasn't been name dropped for the same reason. The person that is Ronin, seen only in a dream of Midoriya's, back in chapter 16. Until Midoriya becomes Ronin, he won't be called Ronin. There, that's the secret behind the name. Not sure it makes sense, but I wrote this, and I don't make sense. The #1 villain and names can't point to that's why the #1 villain hasn't been named, too. Not because he hasn't discovered or earned that name, but because it doesn't mean anything right now. He's just some guy with a cheesy name right now. I aim to fix that. Villain Vigilante. I said earlier I think villain Midoriya is the most realistic version of Midoriya, even compared to the canon of the show. Will I take that route? Maybe, but then I'd have to change tags, and I'm pretty sure I've complained every time I had to change tags. Wink wonk. What's a duck? Heaven's national bird. What's a goose? The creature's made to punish Satan after a long day of torturing souls in his own private corner of hell, but they're so evil they escaped hell. And they're outside my house and won't shut the fuck up. Yee, hope this episode wasn't too dramatic. Next one should be less doom and gloom and more actual fighting. This one's fight lasted in the real world what, half a sentence? That's short, even by my standards. Remember, always cover the weak points. Chapter 24. Chapter 24. Chapter summary. Midoriya has met and made a deal with the master, the boss of Mao and Kurogiri. They agreed to meet in 1 month, with Kurogiri keeping an eye on Midoriya to make sure he doesn't alert the authorities. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midoriya didn't react to be followed by a sentient purple cloud. The abuse came no matter the day, but his twisted smile kept them at bay. Seeing them being such assholes reminded him of what he was fighting for, and made working with the weird potato-headed man bearable. His day went as normal, with Bakugo making his token appearance and hit him. He shrugged it off, chuckling. If this plan played out right, the whole world was going to change. He was sure his idea wouldn't be common spread, but it could change how everyone handles themselves. Vigilantism might become a profession heroes would have to recognize, or surpass the fakes entirely. Midoriya took his notes out, looking at what was supposed to be his project for this month, forging a katana. He began to Google hunting seasons and good hunting grounds, chuckling under his breath. Midoriya exited the school grounds, back straight and head held high. He went to his house, switching off school supplies for equipment. His usual vigilante clothes and some knives, since the rest was at his hideout. He waved goodbye to his mom and went outside. Kurogiri, are you willing to warp me around? He needed to know this, so he could gauge how close he had to go. If he turned him down, the plan wouldn't fail but it would become more difficult. Yes, I am willing and capable of teleporting both of us. Midoriya nodded. Take us to my hideout please, Kurogiri. There was always that threatening aura when he spoke. He didn't even have to try to want to kill him right now. But he was useful, as they turned a 20-minute run into a 5-second step. Midoriya changed into his costume, rolling his shoulders and opening his notes. He traced his finger along the paper, smiling and striking the paper with his finger. Kurogiri, we're going to America. Take us here. It took 3 consecutive teleports to get there. Was it range? Familiarity? He hadn't done anything for Kurogiri yet, so he couldn't exactly ask. Still, they ended up in Alaska one way or another. He tossed Kurogiri the winter coat he had grabbed on his way here and adjusted his costume. He had switched a few things up about his costume. The tank top he'd used for the last 3 months was now long sleeves. The socks were long, and he was wearing the boots again. Still, on the outside, he looked the same. He looked out over the cold winds with a smile beneath his mask. He'd need to gather a lot of materials in this 1 month. A lot of physical hunting, a lot of stealing, and a lot of practice. He whistled as he walked into the hunting grounds. Kurogiri, might you have access to a freezer for large animals? And I might need a butcher's help. Midoriya sat in place for an hour, smiling all the while. It was impossible to get all the materials on his own, but with Kurogiri they could get it together. Then he'd pay Kurogiri back with some lessons so he wasn't such a chump who nearly got shanked. If he did this a normal way, he needed to hunt over 200 bears, which was bullshit. But he wanted to start hunting these grizzlies, who had recently jumped up from only being able to hunt 5 a season to being able to hunt 10. It looked like they on the rise, and soon they might pose a threat. That made what Midoriya was doing right now technically vigilantism, as he was going to be helping illegally. Midoriya watched 5 bears, as large as cars, ramble past. This was just an ordinary takedown for him. Avoid being spotted, and punish the loners. You know Kurogiri, right now, we're gonna stop the bear plague before it even happens. Kurogiri was standing next to him, having gone back to grab real winter gear and drop off the jacket Midoriya brought. So I get to play the hero. Oh joy, I'm ecstatic. Do try to avoid turning me to the side of heroism. Who cares about heroism? Midoriya chuckled, finally spotting a big target at the river crossing they'd been waiting at. He went for his throwing needles. All I'm saying is how the stupidest shit can affect everything. His hand flickered, needles striking the giant bear in the eyes as it stood across the river. The needles were so thin the wind barely did anything to them. They struck into the eye sockets, blinding the bear which roared and began to flail. Soon, we'll be drowning in bears. Then it'll be easy hunting. The ecosystem had gotten all fucked up in Alaska. The animals here had some better quirks than humans. It made them good prey, especially for Midoriya who was hunting for a few specific features. If he could find them, he'd be golden. Right now, he needed to get some kills. Midoriya hopped from pine to pine, quiet now. The bear was flailing now, running into objects. Midoriya wrapped his legs around the tree and assembled his staff, then aimed it like a pool cue. The needle was struck cleanly into the brain. Death was near instant, something Midoriya's studies only told him too well. The killing was easy, keeping them alive was not. It's why Midoriya could seem to cut through most opponents when normally he had to take his time, going slowly to avoid lethal damage. Kurogiri, teleport this body to the pile. The pile was just the spot they picked before to keep all the bodies. Kurogiri had to move close, unaware that if he just stretched the smoke out he could stay in place and teleport things nearby. It was a waste of power, but he thought that because Kurogiri made it look easy. It probably took a lot of concentration. Midoriya sat back, waiting to see what came to the small minute smell of blood and the dying screams of the grizzly. Trees in the distance were crushed as what seemed like cars approached, giving Midoriya another objective to run out of knives. The first day was easygoing, with the largest bear the size of a truck. They got 30, but there were still hundreds in view. Right now was some of that help Midoriya offered to give to his escort. Just make a portal to the location, and send a portal through the first portal to the pile. Midoriya had taken off his helmet and was cleaning the visor of the snow. Kurogiri was showing that this teleporting was more difficult than it looked. Take your time, the bears will eat some of the bodies, but we can get more tomorrow. Kurogiri couldn't do it at first, so now they were experimenting with his limits. I can't send portals through portals, I need to be attached to them. Midoriya nodded, then try stretching out again. Don't force it, relax. Midoriya knew a lot about using quirks from his research, it was why he was so sure his plan could work. Slowly, to the point of it being painful, Kurogiri extended his smoke and got one of the bears. Eventually, they only got 12 out of the 33, plus the one from earlier. Midoriya didn't scold him though, giving him a pat on the back. We'll be back tomorrow to keep working on it. Soon, you'll be doing great. For now, this is great progress. He meant it too, changes like this didn't come easily. It was hard to change your mindset about something you've been doing for years, like trying to switch your gait permanently. They appeared at the pile, inside the butcher shop Midoriya had asked for. He looked over the workers and offered to help himself. Together, with Kurogiri watching from the back, they set up the bears. Midoriya asked that they bleed the corpses out but not throw the blood away, keeping it for him. I need every part of these things, but if I'm lucky tomorrow will be the last time. Day 2, and Kurogiri was learning fast. They went right back, and some of the bears were still there. Midoriya scanned each of them for something, lost in his own thoughts. If I might ask, what exactly are you looking for? Midoriya snapped out of his thoughts, confused for a moment before returning to his focus. There have been reports of metal bears. Steel bones, steel fur. I can't normally take them down, but I want them. The killing method I devised should work on them, even the metal muscles. That family of bears is a big part of the problem, and needs to be hunted out. He looked over and saw Kurogiri's confusion. Imagine you're a hunter, you sit in one place for hours, you see a bear, take your gun and shoot it straight in the heart. Normally that's a kill shot, but the bear has metal muscles. Bullets can't do anything to it, but it looks almost the exact same as every other bear. Kurogiri nodded, starting to realize what he meant by the bear plague. The problem wasn't how many bears they were, it was how difficult they were to kill. Most people didn't have Midoriya's penchant for analyzing and tearing his opponents apart. Presumably, that power was also how he'd find the metal bears. Quote. How do you know the difference, if I may? Right now, all I can find are metal furs, and I don't care about them. Skinning them is very difficult, but it should be good for making equipment. Midoriya leaned forward again. Metal muscles can be seen as a color tinge around the eyes, where the fur is the smallest. Metal bones, the ones I want, usually have metal teeth. And they said quirks were unique. With so many people having quirks, the overlap was inevitable. When you threw in the animal kingdoms, it was amazing just how easy it was to find similar quirks. Not all animals had quirks, and not all species could get quirks. Most insects couldn't. There had been 2 plants throughout all of history, and one couldn't even create other plants with quirks when it reproduced. The other was discovered a year ago and was a blade of grass that regrew to its full height in record time. It had been destroyed when lit on fire by a lightning strike, having been too tall for its own good. Still, Midoriya sat back, before spotting one with a glint in its teeth. He squinted, trying to figure out if it was what he wanted before deciding it probably was. He hopped from tree to tree like a squirrel, resting above it, waiting for it to show him its friends or be alone. He'd gotten 17 today, and was going slower for Kurogiri to get that practice in. They've gotten 15 whole bears, 1 partial, and lost 1. Midoriya needed to make sure they got this one whole. He stalked it for 10 minutes, with them staying in a strange pseudo-pack. They all happened to be in the same place, eating the same dead bears. Finally, Midoriya was getting bored and opted to throw a needle at it to draw the bear toward him. He purposely missed, letting the needle bounce off its body. It roared at the provocation, however minor, and rushed the tree Midoriya was in. Midoriya looked down, waiting for the last second before bailing out of the tree. He had to admit, he wasn't prepared for the bear to jump 10 feet off the ground until they were at eye level and a second away from colliding. Maybe he should have waited a little longer. Midoriya let go of the tree and pushed downward, hitting the ground and rolling as the top of the tree snapped like a cracker, the entire tree falling over under the bear's weight. Midoriya sprang back up, rolling his shoulder, and faced his opponent. They were too close to the other bears to be safe. For a quick kill and Kurogiri to teleport it away, yes, but for a long fight. This needed to end quickly. More needles, at every spot he could think of. They came out like bullets, hitting the nose, the ears, and the eyes. It roared and got a needle in its mouth. Now, it flailed around, crashing without aim. Midoriya retreated away from the bears, letting the bear tire itself out. He calmed his breathing, getting ready for the hard part, and drew 3 pieces of wood tipped in metal. Approaching the creature was difficult. It had been 5 minutes but its speed hadn't slowed. Smell was covered by its own blood, sight was gone, and hearing would still be difficult. To counter this, it became a hurricane of metallic claws and fangs, snapping at anything despite the blood coming from its mouth. Midoriya couldn't even get too close as it would randomly lunge, tackling nearby objects. Its metal bones, hopefully, iron or steel, were at least harder than wood and stone. It could shatter either with ease. The reason Midoriya wanted this was, out of the metal bears, metal bones were the easiest to dissect. Metal fur would be difficult to cut and metal muscle would be impossible to work with when rigor mortis set in. After that, it might be workable, but from what Midoriya saw the best ones were the metal bones. Their claws and teeth made them the best at killing, but they were the easiest to cut up after death. Their diet also made sure the meat tasted good. But right now, a silvery tornado stood in front of him, snarling at everything. A different bear had come too close and was loud enough that the metal bone heard it. It dove, tearing the intruder to shreds. Bones snapped like toothpicks, skulls were crushed and it was still snarling. Midoriya wondered how long it'd take to let it bleed out. Hours. He didn't have hours, he was down to 40 minutes before he needed to get home. His phone coverage wasn't good enough to cover a call from America, especially in these conditions, and the bear might die while he was calling from some other quirk bear. He just needed to get close to the head, maybe if he approached from above. No, that'd put him on something that the bear would probably break. As he was thinking, Kurogiri appeared in a tree at a reasonable distance as instructed. The teleporter could give him the angle he wanted. Kurogiri, I need you to create a portal around its head. Just its head, stay far away physically. Forcing Kurogiri would help his growth. He wouldn't always be able to teleport targets standing still. Quote. I will try. Kurogiri's smoke extended, constantly creeping forward. Midoriya happily sat back, far from the flailing bear. Kurogiri's smoke was slow though, and the bear's erratic movements kept its head from going through the portal. Kurogiri repeated back what he could already see, giving Midoriya a headache. It's too fast and erratic. If it was standing still, or in a more constant position. Midoriya nodded along, annoyed that he couldn't just sit back and let someone else do all the work. But what was it he learned all those months ago? He could only rely on one person. Fine, I'll do it myself. Midoriya took a proper throwing position and lobbed another needle as hard as he could, just aiming to hit the body. In an instant, the bear twisted around and charged at him. Midoriya had put his quarterstaff away when he got out the shuriken so he could better climb the rock. Then he flipped up and over, standing over the charging bear. Its mouth snapped, its paws tore through the air. Midoriya sighed and jumped up and off the rock at the bear, wondering if he could have just hit it with the quarterstaff or kanabo from the rock. It would have taken too long to get out, but if he put it up there before he had to climb up, then he'd have to stop to pick it up, same problem. This was gonna be good old flailing versus flailing. Midoriya went over the snout and claws, sliding down its back and close-lining its neck to hold on. His weight wasn't enough to do shit did, but he could feel his shoulder pulling from its socket at the impact. The bear rose onto its hind legs, roaring as purple smoke finally wrapped around its head. It was staying in mostly the same place, and the bear's head went through the portal, the other end coming out next to Midoriya. Quote. Finally, Midoriya raised a leg, stomping on the needles he'd thrown into its eyes. It roared one last time, but Midoriya kept on stomping. The body fell over, and after Midoriya got up out of the snow he ran up to the body, still kicking it. Stupid fucking fat ass bitch fucking flailing like a goddamn pinwheeling bitch. Midoriya wasn't sure what he was saying, but he was sure he was pissed off. Maybe at the bear, maybe at the plan he made, probably at himself. After a good few minutes of kicking him, Kurogiri spoke up. I believe we should be leaving. Midoriya composed himself, nodding. Quote. Yeah, thanks, Kurogiri. He rolled his shoulders, relaxing for a moment. To the pile. To the pile. The purple fog covered both of them, making them disappear from the rapidly darkening forest, metal bear in tow. Chapter and notes. A short chapter, it's been a while since we've had that. Just a good time with two people, illegally hunting animals. What's more relatable? Answering questions, that's what. Why metal bears? In MHA, quirks are passed down through families. This means animals get spread out into their own pseudo-families by their quirk, especially if they breed a lot to get similar quirks. Metal not only suits the story, but it also makes for a realistic scenario in my opinion when poaching is slightly not as bad as usual. The hunting rate for real bears is 1 per season, but for this, it's raised to 10 per season. This comes from the extinction period being long since past, and the quirks making them harder to kill. Also, metal bears would be able to eat more types of food with their new teeth, making more of them. This all converges to create more bears than there should be. This wasn't much other than hunting bears, and it kind of feels like writing a side story. Some people might already know the plot I'm going for, dunno. I had this plan from the beginning, but I'm not sure how it will turn out. Still, should be a fun train wreck. Also, for people wondering why Midoriya jumped at the bear, he was going to use his elbow to hammer them in. What Kurogiri did was actually pointless because he was too slow. Midoriya was going to do it himself anyway, it just helped Kurogiri feel more useful and gave him more experience. Chapter 25. Chapter 25. Chapter summary. Midoriya has been given 1 month by Kurogiri's master to make preparations for something. He spent the first 2 days hunting bears in Alaska and has now returned home. Chapter notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Midnight was trying not to pass out on the roof, bored shitless. I'm gonna be honest, I'm pretty sure that information was fake. What makes you say that? Aizawa was fine, somehow. He always looked terrible, so he couldn't go any lower. She was a little jealous, but she had standards. They couldn't even spell the name of the street right. Midnight's mood was hitting all new lows. This was the third day they'd been here, and her ass was killing her. Rooftops, it appeared, were not meant to be chairs. This is a goddamn ghost chase. One more day. Midnight snarled at him for that. How many times have you said that? This was supposed to be the last day. She ran a hand through her mess of hair. She only got to apply shampoo and conditioner did for the last 2 months and it was showing. When this was over, she needed a serious spa day to get herself back in peak condition. Maybe she could do some vigilante scouting at a salon. Whatever you just thought, don't do it in focus. A racer of fun knocked her on the back of the head, his eyes still fixed on the building. What? There hasn't been a sign of any good vigilantes since Oni. They didn't count Psychopath. He was clearly a villain who just happened to be in the same place as some rapists. Good that he was there, bad that he existed. Quote. If I give you money, will you shut up? She brightened instantly. Ooh, really? He checked his pocket. I got 26 yen. Her face froze up. Ah, you're poor too. Don't worry, and save your money. You can afford a real house someday. His eyebrow twitched. I'm not homeless. He scowled, brightening up her mood. Whatever, but still, you ever wonder what happened to that vigilante I'm supposed to be chasing? No, but I do have some good news for you. The theory about country hopping was right, but not who we thought. She cocked her head, trying to think about who he was talking about. Some hunters in America reported a guy throwing needles with his left hand hunting bears in Alaska. No description of the person, he was too far away, but they found his victims. They could hear him though. Thank God, I wouldn't want to run into that guy in the dark of the night. What if he skewers me before he passes out, or fakes being passed out so he can gouge my eye out? She had gotten in danger before, but psychos were the worst. You never knew what was coming from them. Midoriya sat meditating. Tomorrow's Sunday, and that's the day between me and my mom. We're going to be at a golf course all morning, then spend the afternoon at an aquarium. You can follow us to those places without standing out, right? Kurogiri nodded, admiring his homemade target. He could consistently get bullseye with his left, but what happened when he threw with his right is a mystery not even he knew. Do not worry, though I am worried about what you're trying to do. Physical weapons have little value against quirks. Do you think I'm just going to offer some slightly sturdier than average weapons? It was what Kurogiri had been thinking actually, but it seemed a little basic for the vigilante's mind. Don't worry, if nothing else your boss's henchman will enjoy what I have planned, whether or not he takes the deal. Put in a good word for me, yeah. Kurogiri nodded, then watched the child drift to sleep. He only stopped all the planning when he was unconscious. Kurogiri was curious what the boy's plan was, but he intended to let it play out. Midoriya would have told him if he wanted, and Kurogiri didn't see any of this as a problem to the master's plan. Still, Midoriya was adapting well to the limitations Kurogiri imposed on himself and had discovered some of the same tactics Kurogiri himself used when he got serious, though Kurogiri pretended he was incapable. Still, sending a portal through a portal. That could be fun. Midoriya was definitely improving at this whole golf thing, getting a hole without sending it spiraling out of the course. It was the little things that made it nice, like his mom cheering him on. He could even ignore the terrible disguised Kurogiri, who just stayed one hole behind them most of the time. Hawaiian floral print. Where had he heard about disguises from? American buddy cop films. Still, life was pretty good. His mom was still regularly getting it in under 3 hits when she tried, and he was getting actively worse when he tried. They were living very nicely on their budget without buying any more without buying a ton of hero stuff. He still had a few he liked. After the putt-putt, they picked up lunch to eat on the go. He smiled as he admired how far they had come. His mom wasn't exactly the pinnacle of fit, but she had put off most of the weight she had been putting on. Most importantly, she didn't look as stressed out or tired. Being physically healthy to get rid of the fat was fine, but it was better to be mentally healthy to stop the cause of it. Still, pushing a conspicuously empty baby stroller behind them, went Kurogiri. He looked as subtle as a lit stick of dynamite in a peace conference. His attire had switched. Was he seriously going to teleport just to switch clothes? This was ridiculous. Still, the aquarium was nice. A good way to kill time, and there were some heroes there just hanging out. The peaceful scene warmed his heart, and a genuine smile sneaked onto his face without him noticing. For Kurogiri, it was a reminder of a life no longer his. Calm moments spent with loved ones. No one trying to kill you. He hadn't had that in years. Right now though, it was like a different world. The woman beside Midoriya, who looked vaguely like his sister but was actually his mother, was quite happy to be spending time with her son. It was a little strange. It did explain why he didn't want to get involved with his master though. As much as he liked the man, that was a tar pit that was quite tricky to get out of. For the sake of his mother, Midoriya had to keep as little interaction with the master as possible. He adjusted his large star sunglasses and sombrero both bought at the gift shop with his own pay. As much as he enjoyed it, he needed to focus on the mission. And maybe get a slushie. Barkeeping was hard work, and he'd be damned if he didn't enjoy this vacation. Midoriya looked over what they had, and asked Kurogiri, do you have a way of drawing blood? Oh, like a safe way, like a blood center one, but if that's impossible. The boy was showing more and more. The cold shell he put up wasn't gone, but Kurogiri was starting to become privy to the things beneath it. Like the boy's mumbling, which he usually kept internal these days. Yes, we do. Do you have something you wish to do? Midoriya nodded. I want to draw as much of my blood as possible. I'm not sure it will be necessary, but it could help my final project. Kurogiri nodded and opened a portal to the Nomu workshop for both of them after making sure no one was there. He flipped the sign to occupied and went over to the counter, sitting down. I'm not sure you can do it, so could you get the doctor to do it? Thanks, Kurogiri. He wasn't ready for the positivity. Could he really be the same species as that immature brat who'd probably still be sitting in his bar, playing games? Still, he fetched the doctor and told him what he was doing. Midoriya took all the blood, making sure the doctor wouldn't check who he was. Kurogiri assured him, their relationship was to be kept as a secret as long as possible. The more people who knew might try to make similar deals, and Midoriya hadn't actually agreed to work with them yet. Such a thing would be a breach of the agreement, but more importantly, it would be a breach of trust. In relationships like this, you needed all the trusted people you could get. Midoriya's openness and honesty was why his master accepted the vigilante's offer, after all. After donating blood, he was more tired and unfocused than usual, putting him at the level of most people only a year older than him instead of 6. He hydrated himself and asked Kurogiri to keep this with the blood from the bears then take him home. It had been a long Sunday, and it was time for the vigilante to catch some Z's. After school, he came back to the butcher's and collected the blood, checking the liquids before mixing it all together and setting it aside to dry into one mass in a paper form. He'd taken a day off after donating blood to plan something, a lot of notes that meant nothing to Kurogiri. Now, he poured the mess of red and brown into a paper tub he'd made himself to dry and began taking notes on the butchers, asking questions about how to properly cut them up. They clearly knew what they were doing and weren't normal butchers, but Midoriya was more eager to learn right now. Kurogiri wagered that, no matter what, this wasn't the least time Midoriya went hunting for the metal bears. He even helped cut up the metal bear, which was only an iron-boned bear. Midoriya gave the men the meat, worth tens of thousands of yen a pound, as payment for helping him. It was overpaying if Kurogiri ever saw it. These men were working because they were told to. Still, they seemed to enjoy it. But now, he was watching blood dry as Midoriya sat in the initial office, cutting into a strange, styrofoam-like brick that was by and large far too big. Midoriya finished with it, giving it a look over before grabbing a set of lantern batteries and prying the case open, gutting it. Quote. Is all of this really related to your final project that you mentioned? The blood was at least covered, so nothing could get into it. Midoriya nodded. I need to make sure this works in as many ways as possible. Did you pick up the metal leather from Alaska with the money I gave you? Kurogiri stopped staring at the blood, taking a length of leather out of his shopping bag. It would have cost a lot, but the man wasn't likely to notice that some of the straps near the back room disappeared. Quote. I used my own money. Here you go. He gave him back the 200,000 yen. The money was already excessive, but the idiot had charged even more for it. It was only copper leather anyway, not even a high-quality metal. That kind of bear could still be killed with a gun. Midoriya nodded, finishing up his weird battery thing, having stuck them inside clamps and attached wires to the clamps. He checked the battery the wires were hooked up to, making sure they weren't turned on before he got up and went to the bones. He needed to clean up the pieces he got back from the butchers, and clean off the rust that had developed on the teeth and claws. A rough brush and chemicals would see them clean as a whistle. Midoriya was smiling as he worked, enjoying himself. He easily lost himself in his work, looking over the metal even though it wasn't smooth. He then took a step back, looking over all the rough bones and trying to pick which one was good enough for his work. One bare femur went into his tongs as he went over to his strange creation, and with a flick of a finger it turned on. There was a buzz of electricity and mumbled surprise as Midoriya forgot to cover his eyes. He opted for a piece of cloth over his eyes, but Kurogiri couldn't see shit right now so he guessed it wasn't the worst choice. Midoriya brought it onto the slab of metal he had bolted to the counter. It might have been part of an oven or something once, but now it was a poor man's anvil. Midoriya picked up his mallet and began hammering, whistling as he worked. Kurogiri, please stop staring and grab that water, pour it right there. Yup, thanks. Then it was 7:00 backwood clock and Kurogiri had worked up a sweat. Despite the cold weather, Midoriya was just in a tank top. The room was hot and lit by his arc furnace, and Kurogiri swore the hammer was making him go deaf. He closed up shop, tapping Kurogiri in the shoulder with a smile on his face. Don't look so upset, this is gonna be our formula for a bit. Oh, except Wednesday, I got a date with a gym and some sleep on Wednesday. He laughed at what might have been a joke, patting Kurogiri on the shoulder. It was sweltering. Kurogiri eventually started opening portals to colder places before Midoriya chastised him, saying that the cold might ruin the metal if it was cooled too quickly. He insisted Kurogiri switch to lighter clothes, while he still wore a tank top and long pants. Without the apron, it seemed a little dangerous as hot metal and sparks flew around the room. He at least went on opening the windows. He was going to choke on smoke otherwise. Still, not one bit of these problems hampered the forger. You set up the metal jacket. Everything the boy know, the vigilante talked about had been forging this thing. Maybe he was right, and his weapons really were special. Whatever the case, all this hammering was still getting to Kurogiri. Yes, I'm going now. Kurogiri was forced to hold the metal by the tongs, heating it in this arc furnace, some sort of forge that used hot electricity to quickly heat up and melt metal, which seemed counterintuitive to not letting the cold in because it would cool too fast, whatever that meant. This stuff was getting red hot in 10 seconds. How fast did he think too fast was? He pressed the metal down into the grip they made, still not entirely sure about one peculiar thing. It was a problem he had with the blade or a question that no one had answered. Why had Midoriya spent most of the last week hammering the blood? It had formed a solid mass and immediately gotten forged by Midoriya. Slowly, through a painstaking process, the blood was turned into metal and then refined into good iron. Right now, they were going to add both his and the bear's blood to the sword. The metal bone had a groove for the blood metal to go into, and Midoriya dropped it in place and began hammering while Kurogiri's hands cooked inside gloves. God had not intended for man to stand this close to glowing metals for this long with only a piece of cloth as protection. Still, Midoriya was only wearing gloves and a tank top, oblivious to the sparks as he drove the metals into each other. Put it back in the furnace, I'll turn it on. They went through this for 30 minutes before Midoriya was satisfied and took back over. You're doing great, Kurogiri. You could become a real blacksmith at this rate. Sincerely, fuck you, and fuck blacksmithing. He was beyond manners, something very few people made him do. He could stand for hours at a time, listen to the most boring of speeches, stand toe-to-toe with pro heroes, but it was this fucking forging that'd be the death of him. He was sure he was getting cooked, and his arms were killing him. Least you're still energetic. Midoriya smiled and kept on hitting, cementing the edge as he worked. The bone metal was hard to work with, but nothing seemed to be as stubborn as Midoriya. He just smiled and kept on hammering. Finally, 2.5 weeks of work, and there was a blade. A real,